Item number 3, oath of allegiance or affirmation of a new senator. Item number 4, confirmation of minutes.
The Honorable
Mr. President, I beg to move that the minutes of the proceedings of the sitting of the Senate held at the Parliament Chamber, Mount Weldale, St. George's, on Friday, the 14th of September, 2018, be taken as read.
The question is that the minutes of the proceedings of the sitting of the Senate held at the Parliament Chamber, Mount Weldale, St. George's on the 14th of February, September 2018 be taken as read. All those who have that opinion say aye. To the contrary view say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. Senator Steele.
Mr. President, I beg to move that the minutes of the proceedings of the sitting of the Senate held at the Parliament Chamber, Mount Weldale, St. George's on February the 14th, Friday, the 14th of September 2018, be confirmed.
Honorable members, the question is that the said minutes be confirmed. All those who are of that opinion say aye. To the contrary view say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. Senator Steele.
Mr. President, I beg to move that the minutes of the proceedings of the sitting of the Senate held at the Parliament Chamber, Mount Weldale, St. George's, on Monday, the 8th of October, 2018, be taken as read.
Honorable members, the question is that the minutes of the proceedings of the sitting of the Senate held at the Parliament Chamber, Mount Weldale, St. George's, on Monday, 8th October 2018, be taken as read. All those who have that opinion say aye. To the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. Senator Steele.
Mr. President, I beg to move that the minutes of the proceedings of the sitting of the Senate held at the Parliament Chamber, Mount Weldale, St. George's, on Monday, the 8th of October, 2018, be confirmed.
Honorable members, the question is that the said minutes be confirmed. All those who have that opinion say aye. Aye. To the contrary view say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. Minutes has been confirmed.
Item number 5, messages from the Governor General. Item number 6, announcements by Mr. President.
Honorable members, you would have noticed that this morning's session begun with the absence of one of the ceremonial marks of Parliament, the traditional wig. I think there was a sufficiency of explanation in the lower house during the budget debate when the speaker explained the reasons why we were debunking for regular sessions this last symbolic vestige of our colonial past. And for us of African peoples, of course, it has other sorts of significations which it may not be appropriate for me to delve into at this time. Sufficient to say that this decision was contemplated for quite a while, and it was then taken. We believe that the essence of democracy, while tradition and symbolism is important, in our own historical trajectory, we believe that we can jettison certain things which have a profound different reminder of the past, while keeping the essence of the system. And so that today, for the first time, you would have noticed that we came into the chamber without the traditional way. That having been said, honorable members, I want to take the opportunity also to recognize the fact that in the other place to which the Prime Minister, the Honorable Dr. Keith Mitchell, belongs, that this month marks his 35th year, unbroken as a parliamentarian. That is a significant and historic achievement. I am not speaking of partisan politics, I'm just speaking of the fact that an individual can spend 35 years sitting in the parliament representing his constituency unbroken. Not to be self-righteous, close on the heels is your goodly servant. I hope I can make 35. I'm still a few years away from that. And much of that, of course, was as a result of the confidence that the workers bestowed in me and the privilege they gave me of serving. So I think it's my duty really in this House to recognize that contribution of the longest serving member. If I'm not mistaken, this might be a historic first, you know. It might be a historic first. I haven't had time to research it deeply, but I can think of no other parliamentarian, even Sir Eric. Sir Eric came in, I think it was in 52. 52. Probably Sir Eric has competed with him. I haven't completed the research. But nonetheless, comrades, I think, oh, sorry, nonetheless, honorable members, I think it is something worth recognizing. It speaks a lot to the strength of our democracy, and it speaks a lot to standards which I believe we should all aspire to. As I look at the younger politicians among us, I think it's a record you should try to surpass, and I would invite you to take up the challenge. Honorable members, as you know, we have several days of debate before us. In my discussions with the Leader of Government's Business, we believe that with good measure and efficient chairing that we can complete this very important work of debate of the 2019 estimates of income and expenditure, that we could complete this over a 3-day period. It will involve going over the 4 o'clock hour on some occasions, but we will try to limit that. Also, we try to take lunch on time. I make reference to the fact that our labor laws set out that you can't work for more than 4 hours, and I think Senator Andre Lewis will be the first to take objection if the president went afoul of the law. So we should aim to have our break somewhere around the 1 o'clock hour, and I would suggest, unless there's objections, that that break be 45 minutes, unless members feel differently, and then we probably can extend it for an hour. But closer to the 1 o'clock hour, we could make a decision on that by some indications. Yes, and I will be very accommodating. As members know, the standing orders set out that the Leader of Government's Business would have an hour and a half to make his presentation, and the leader on the other side would have a similar length of time. At the president's discretion, every senator can be given 15 minutes more. I will tell you something that I've always contemplated. I always felt, and I'm not speaking against the rules, but I always felt that given the importance of a debate on the national budget, that, excuse me, sorry about this, I'm breaking my own rule. I've always felt, and I'd belonged to the Senate in the days when there was unrestrained time. But the rules are the rules, but what I can assure you, that I would be flexible. The 15-minute discretion that I have, I will exercise it to every member's benefit, so that in effect, everyone will enjoy that 15 minutes. So in the case of the government, the leader of government's business, he will therefore have an hour and 45 minutes. Likewise, the principal responder, Senator, the Honorable Glennis Roberts, will have a similar amount. And then for each other senator, you will have an hour and 15 minutes. Of course, at the hour and 15 minutes, if you're in the middle of a point and you're going to tie it up, I again would be lenient. But certainly don't attempt to test my patience on this. It's an hour and 15 minutes. But as I said, if you're making a point and you have not tied the point up and leave it hanging, I will be a bit generous. So I don't want everybody to judge me on the basis that I'm giving somebody an extra minute or so. The nation looks at the Senate in respect of these debates, and I'm fairly confident that the standards that we've set in the past will be maintained, and we probably even have a higher standard this time around. So, honorable members, that's all I wish to say as some introductory remarks to this very important session and sit-in of the Senate. And I thank you for your indulgence.
Item number 7, ministerial statements. Item number 8, presentation of papers and reports from select committees.
Mr. President, I beg to move the following papers and reports relating on the table. Annual report and statement of the Grenada Authority for the Regulation of Financial Institutions, GARFIN, for the year ended 31st December 2017. Grenada Solid Waste Management Authority Annual Report 2017. GARFIN Annual Report of the Supervisor of Insurance for the year ended December 31st, 2017. Report of the Director of Audit on the Public Accounts of Grenada for the year ended 31st December 2012. Report of the Director of Audit on the Public Accounts of Grenada for the year ended 31st December 2013. Report of the Director of Audit on the Public Accounts of Grenada for the year ended 31st December 2014. Report of the Director of Audit on the Public Accounts of Grenada for the year ended 31st December 2015. 2019 Estimates of Revenue and Expenditure. 2019 Budget Statement. Government of Grenada Report, the Budget Framework Paper 2019, Compliance Assessment Report 2017 to 2018, the Fiscal Risk Statement, the Medium-Term Debt Management Strategy 2019 to 2021, the Medium-Term Fiscal Framework Document 2019 to 2021.
As indicated by the Leader of Government's Business, Senator the Honorable Simon Steele, are now laid on the table.
Item number 9, petitions. Item number 10, government notices. Item number 11, unofficial notices. Item number 12, questions.
Senator the Honorable Livingston Redhead.
Yes, Mr. President. Good morning, and thank you. I am a bit new to the procedure, Mr. President, so please, I would ask if you can guide me or bear with me in regards to asking the questions. But according to the standing order number 13, Mr. President, I am required to quote the item, the number of the item on the question on the order paper this morning. So I would do so, quote number 12, questions, and I am then required, Mr. President, to proceed to ask the question. Is that true?
Yes.
Right.
To the question on the order paper by number.
Okay.
But here again, I always felt that this is very restrictive because we are in the Senate not by virtue of our own design. We are here representing the people. And the people are not part of the debate. If you said it was question number 2, no one who is listening outside or who doesn't have access to the other paper will know what number 2 is. So again, my own flexibility on the rules so that it not only conforms with the rules but also makes common sense is on display on that matter. So you can stand and actually read verbatim the question that you've placed on the other paper, and that I will allow.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. So, Mr. President, question 1, first question, part A, Mr. President, reads, would the Leader of Government's Business inform the Senate of the present status of the inquiry into the Marketing and National Importing Board, MNIB? Part B, in doing so, would the Leader of Government's Business provide the House with the names of the members of the body currently conducting the investigation? Part C, was the financial audit completed in accordance with Section 82 of the Public Finance Management Act on MNIB for the periods 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016, and 2017? Part D, did the Financial Intelligence Unit, FIU, investigate MNIB at any time during the period 2013 to 2018? And Part E, would the findings of the investigation be made available to the Senate? First question.
Senator Steele.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. And as is the case in the Senate, questions were received, Mr. President, last week. Those questions, and it will be the same response for questions 2 and 3 as well, were forwarded to the relevant ministries, the relevant persons, to provide those responses. And in due course, hopefully by the next sitting, once those answers have been provided and assessed, we'll be able to provide the answers to this Honourable House.
Okay. Senator, right ahead.
All right, Mr. President. Mr. President, for my benefit, could the Leader of Government Business just repeat? Is it that he's saying question 3 as well as question 1? He will not.
From my understanding, what he has indicated is that all of the questions, 1 through 3, has suffered the same fate. The questions were received last week. You may not be aware, but the individual senator doesn't go himself researching the questions. The questions are then given to the relevant permanent secretaries who then formulate the answers. The minister takes responsibility, or the senator takes responsibility for the answers. He has to ensure that the answers that are given are as accurate to the best of his knowledge. But the process is a little bit long winding, and sometimes it takes time to get there. And I believe in the context of what we are aware of how last week and week before was, I could see some cause for slowing the process down. So he has given an undertaking that the answers should be ready by the next sitting of the House, which would be sometime towards the latter part of January, because if I'm not mistaken, Senator Steele, this may be the last sitting of this House until we close for the Christmas vacation. Yes, unless there's some emergent, that's our understanding. So that the answer to the questions would be provided in the first sitting of January 2019. Yes? No, not necessarily, because the answer will be the same.
Item number 13, personal explanations. Item number 14, motions.
Mr. President, I beg to move the following motion standing in my name. Whereas debate on the gracious address delivered by the Governor-General on the occasion of the ceremonial state opening of the second session of the 10th Parliament on Monday the 19th of November 2018 was further deferred to a date to be fixed, be it resolved that the said address be now debated by the House. Mr. President, I propose to amend the said motion so that it will read, be it resolved that the said address be now deferred to a date to be fixed.
That the motion standing in the name of the Leader of Government's Business, Senator the Honorable Simon Steele, be amended as follows. Whereas debate on the gracious address delivered by the Governor-General on occasion of the ceremonial opening of the second session of the 10th Parliament on Monday, 19th November 2018 was further deferred to a date to be fixed. Be it resolved that the said address be further delayed to a date to be fixed. The amendment is, be it resolved that the said address be further delayed to a date to be fixed. Honourable members, all those who have that opinion say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes do indeed have it. Simon Steele.
Mr. President, I beg to move the following motion standing in my name. Whereas it is necessary to appropriate for the services of the State of Grenada for the year 2019 by means of an Appropriation Act, be it resolved that the estimate for expenditure for the fiscal year January 1st to December 31st, 2019 be approved.
Honourable member, yes.
Mr. President, as this is the money motion, I wish to signal to this Honourable House that the motion has been endorsed with a Speaker's certificate and that I have the necessary consent to proceed. Mr. President, the theme for the 2019 estimate for revenue and expenditure is building resilience, advancing social development, transforming our economy. Mr. President, this is the first budget prepared under this new National Party administration, which came into office on the 13th of March 2018. This is also the first budget presented in this wonderful new Parliament building, designed by a Grenadian, a kayak to be exact, Brian Bullen, built by Grenadians, and through those of us who are privileged to serve in it, representing the hopes and dreams of every Grenadian, Carriacouan, and Petit Martinican. Mr. President, although this is the first budget of this new administration, it does not stand in isolation. It builds on the 6 budgets presented under our previous term in office during the period 2013 to 2018. It builds on the significant progress made economically, infrastructurally, and socially over the past 5 years through collective national effort. Government's strategy over this period has evolved from one which focused on stabilizing our economy, necessitated by the national economic crisis we faced when we first came into office in 2013, to implementing the necessary measures to lock in and protect the significant gains made through the successful implementation of the Homegrown Structural Adjustment Programme. Through to now, as we strategically position Grenada along a sustainable development path, expanding on all priority developmental areas, economically, physically, and socially, as we continue to ensure growth and developmental benefits impact our people in a meaningful way. But importantly, also ensuring that there is inbuilt resilience in all that we do to enable us to better withstand any external shocks and recover from any potential setbacks. Mr. President, let me go back to stabilizing the economy. It is sometimes easy for us to forget where we came from, those hard-fought gains, and the temptation to relax and do what is politically easy, appealing to the popular and responding blindly to the loudest demands. Mr. President, now that we're seeing light at the end of this very long, dark tunnel, it's easy to forget those difficult times. The struggles of ordinary families to make ends meet. The challenges faced by small and large businesses alike. The business closures, the workers sent home, mortgage foreclosures, the salaries that went unpaid, the bills that went unpaid, the selling of government assets, the economic pressures that bore down on every element of Grenadian society. From Maziponpon and Madame Pierre in Petit Martinique in the north, throughout Carriacou, to Grenada, Point Celine in the south. No one was untouched by the self-inflicted financial and political crisis we faced between 2008 and 2013. Mr. President, it is easy for some of us to forget why we set a new course. A course that is designed to prevent us from returning to those worst of times. Why we made that shared sacrifice to successfully complete the homegrown structural adjustment program and stabilize our economy. Why we enshrined in law fiscal responsibility rules to protect our economic gains. It's easy to forget the hundreds of millions of dollars we received in support from the international community for doing the right things. But we must not forget to ignore the fact that hundreds of millions of dollars that we are still due to receive for continuing to do the right things will be lost if we veer off our fiscally responsible course. Mr. President, before I continue, I wish to congratulate the Minister of Finance and his team for the considerable work and effort that went into the compilation of the 2019 budget. It has been developed in compliance with and in accordance to the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2015, the Public Debt Management Act of 2015, and the Public Finance Management Act, also of 2015. And in compliance with these acts, the following 5 reports have already been laid on the table. The Medium-Term Fiscal Framework Document 2019 to 2021, the Progress Report on Compliance with the Fiscal Rules and Targets, the Budget Framework Paper 2019, the Medium-Term Debt Management Strategy 2019 to 2021, and the Fiscal Risk Statement. Mr. President, the preparation of this budget and the government's overall fiscal management of our nation's affairs are based on best practice. Best practices that have pulled us back from the brink of financial crisis to a nation now living within its means and praised by the international community. Today, Grenada is held up as one of the model countries in the region and internationally applauded for its economic growth and job creation-centered fiscal management. Mr. President, this may be an opportune moment to once again single out our Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, whose leadership with the support of his team has gotten us to this point. His recent World Bank award for Caribbean Finance Minister of the Year is a testament to these achievements. And we cannot underestimate the significance of this award. Mr. President, I know there is a former Minister of Finance out there who may believe he is worthy of such an accolade, without appreciating that such awards are based on positive performance, not by running the country's finances into the ground. It's performance, Mr. President, that counts. It's performance. The programme priorities presented in the 2019 budget are are set out within the context of government's wider medium-term agenda, the MTA, an agenda based on the strategic development objectives for the period 2019 to 2021. The MTA outlines the development, planning, and strategic interventions to promote resilience in all its forms: economic, social, and environmental, and at the same time accelerating inclusive, job-rich growth and creating greater prosperity for all. Mr. President, this is not about cold numbers on a spreadsheet or financial statements that are meaningless to the ordinary man and woman. What this government is seeking to achieve is to bring meaningful and tangible benefits to our people. Economic growth that is not only reflected in government statistics, but also positively felt by impactful improvements in the quality of life of all our citizens, especially those that are most vulnerable. The three principles underpinning the MTA are accelerating sustainable and inclusive economic growth, enhancing social capital and citizen well-being, promoting resilient governance. All three of these are reflected in this year's budget theme: building resilience, advancing social development, transforming our economy. It must be noted, Mr. President, that the creation of the MTA has been an inclusive process, securing broad-based consensus through stakeholder engagement and consultation to secure buy-in. This is key to a successful implementation of these programs. So moving to the global and regional economic development. Mr. President, to provide the necessary context for Grenada's economic performance, it is important for us to understand the global and regional economic outlook. According to the latest World Economic Outlook report, global growth is estimated at 3.7% and to remain at 3.7% in 2019. This is a downward revision from the 3.9% in the major advanced economies, most notably the United States, due to the potential fallout from the recently announced trade tariffs. Growth in some emerging markets and developing economies, especially the oil exporting ones, has been revised up on account of projected increases in oil prices. Regional economic performance and prospects. Mr. President, within CARICOM, the provisional estimate is that the average growth is estimated at 1.1% in 2018. However, the projected regional growth rate for 2019 will increase to 3%. And this will be driven by higher rates of growth forecasted for Dominica, Grenada, and Guyana. Within the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union, the ECCU, average economic growth of 0.4% is estimated in 2018, a reduction relative to the average growth rate of 1.5% in 2017. This is due to the economic decline estimated for Dominica in the wake of Hurricane Maria. However, an upswing is projected in 2019, with growth averaging 4.3%, with the increased economic activity generated by their reconstruction efforts. In the non-ECCU countries, average growth is estimated at 1.6% in 2018 and is projected to increase marginally to an average of 1.9% in 2019. Moving on to the domestic economic performance and prospects. Mr. President, Grenada's economy has grown consistently since 2013 and is projected to experience its sixth consecutive year of growth in 2018. Economic growth of 5.2% in real terms is provisionally estimated for the year. This compares to an earlier conservative projection of 3.3%. Grenada's impressive growth rate is driven by the expansions in the major sectors, specifically construction, tourism, transport, private education, and manufacturing. Today, Grenada remains the fastest growing economy within the region averaging real growth of 5% since 2013. This is impressive, Mr. President. Growth in 2019 is conservatively projected to be around 4.2%. That is the regional average. But please note, Mr. President, every year for the past 6 years, we have exceeded the projected targets. Unemployment. Mr. President, there is a direct correlation between increased economic activity and job creation. The preliminary results of the 2018 Labour Force Survey indicate that the unemployment rate has fallen by 2.7%. And that is moving from 23.6% in December 2017 to 20.9% in June 2018, the latest period for which data has been provided. What this number tells us is that the employed labour force has expanded significantly. This means jobs have been found for recent school and college leavers and others entering the labour market for the first time. But in addition, there has also been a significant decline in the unemployed labour force, those who have been long-term unemployed who have now found work. Mr. President, it is important to point out that the unemployment rate could fall further by the end of this year. With the government's recent addition of another batch of 800 Imani trainees, plus 500 young men employed in the Empower initiative, plus another 800 persons having been employed in the Housing Construction Brigade, and as environmental wardens, will collectively have a significant downward impact on the unemployment rate. Mr. President, let us not forget where the unemployment rate was when we first entered into office in 2013, over 40%. To bring the rate down by half and still falling is a remarkable achievement and a testament of the effectiveness of this new National Party administration. Not only have we stimulated significant economic growth, it has also been job-creating growth. Mr. President, this is not about chest beating. Our work is not done. The unemployment rate is still far too high. Efforts need to be sustained to continue driving economic activity, which in turn creates new job opportunities for our people, especially our young men and women, and also the most vulnerable. Grenada's fiscal performance. Mr. President, I will now speak to government's fiscal performance for the current financial year. Grenada's fiscal position remains strong and continues to strengthen further, with a projected primary surplus after grants of 6.2% of GDP at the end of 2018. This compares to 5.7% in 2017. Ongoing reforms in the Inland Revenue Department, the Customs and Excise Division, as well as government's initiatives to reduce its overall expenditure and increase in economic activity, have all contributed to this improved performance and us living within our means. By the end of 2018, the following results relative to the approved budget are expected. Current revenue of $747.2 million compared to the target of $710.4 million. Grants of $102.6 million compared to the target of $148.0 million. Current expenditure of $594.6 million compared to the target of $607.1 million. Capital expenditure of $118.9 million compared to the target of $171.3 million. The Customs and Excise collections are expected to reach $367.8 million compared to the target of $344 million, an overperformance of $23.8 million. The Inland Revenue Department is estimated to collect $353.8 million compared to the target of $338 million, an overperformance of $15.8 million. Mr. President, year-on-year overperformance on revenue collections is a direct reflection of increased economic activity across the board. There have been no further tax increases since the conclusion of the fiscal reforms. In fact, over the past 2 budgets, there have been tax cuts in keeping with government's principle of shared sacrifice, shared gains. Therefore, increases in revenue collection are due more persons entering the job market that are eligible for income tax payment on monies earned. Businesses are making greater profits, and the corporate taxes are derived from those increased profits. Increases in volume of imported goods due to increased consumer demand from consumers with greater disposable income account for these increases in customs revenues. In simple terms, increased consumption of goods and services, more people selling, more people buying, all evidence of increased economic activity and the positive signs of a stronger economy. Public debt. Mr. President, public debt as a ratio of GDP has declined significantly since coming into office, moving from 108% in 2013 to an estimated 62.7% at the end of 2018. It is projected to be further reduced to 55% of GDP by the end of 2020, surpassing the ECCB's target of 60% 10 years ahead of the 2030 deadline. Estimates of revenue and expenditure for 2019. Mr. President, having provided the international, regional, and local context for the budget, I'd now like to move on to the 2019 estimates of revenues and expenditure, which provide for a total expenditure, including principal repayments on public debt, of $1,134,013,956. And that is broken down as follows. Recurrent revenue, $780.4 million. Recurrent expenditure, $637.8 million. Current account surplus, $142.7 million. Capital expenditure, $196.4 million. Primary surplus after grants, $201.9 million. Overall surplus after grants, $129.9 million. Principal repayments, amortization, $299.8 million. Mr. President, as stated at the start of my presentation, the theme for this year's budget is building resilience, advancing social development, transforming our economy. The reference to resilience here speaks to the broadest definition of the word: economic or fiscal, physical, that's infrastructure, and social, about our people and communities. Strategically combining and strengthening each of these pillars will lead to a model of national development that is both sustainable and resilient to external shocks, critical in overcoming the natural vulnerabilities a small island developing state such as ours face every single day. Mr. President, I shall now run through each of the 3 areas in turn: fiscal resilience, infrastructural resilience, and social resilience. So starting with fiscal resilience. Mr. President, Grenada has long been recognized as a leader, both regionally and internationally, in the climate change and natural disaster arenas, and more recently in the area of resilience building. Grenada's strategic approach to building fiscal resilience can be demonstrated through the implementation of the following measures. Successfully incorporating disaster relief provisions, hurricane clauses, into some of our loan instruments. These hurricane clauses provide government with debt service payment relief on specific loans in the event of a natural disaster, such as a hurricane. This payment holiday would enable government to redirect those monies, which would otherwise go to servicing debt, to be channeled to immediately finance post-disaster relief and reconstruction efforts to get the country back on its feet. Grenada was the first country in the region to implement such an innovative instrument. Other Caribbean countries will follow. The enactment of the Fiscal Responsibility Law in 2015 is another demonstration of Grenada's commitment to building fiscal resilience. The FRL provides the foundation for sound fiscal policy, which has contributed directly to a significantly stronger fiscal and debt position. The FRL provides a rules-based framework for fiscal discipline in addition to the establishment of a contingency fund upon attaining a debt-to-GDP ratio of 55%. This contingency fund provides a dedicated financial buffer that can support emergency responses and recovery efforts in the event of a natural disaster. Through strong fiscal management, Grenada has generated a fiscal surplus that can provide an additional fiscal buffer and supplementary funding sources for investment in resilience-building initiatives. Another mechanism established to provide a financial facility to facilitate an accelerated recovery process in the event of a natural disaster is the Caribbean Catastrophic Risk Insurance Facility. It is a regional natural disaster fund for Caribbean governments designed to limit the financial impact of devastating hurricanes and earthquakes by quickly providing financial payouts when a policy is triggered by a specific natural disaster event criteria. Mr. President, the ongoing threat of de-risking that confronts the region's financial services sector remains real. Grenada, together with our regional neighbors, remain acutely sensitive to the potentially disruptive and damaging impacts to the economy associated with this issue. We will sustain efforts to mitigate this threat through national and regional initiatives that identify appropriate solutions. The need to also provide a viable solution regarding deposit insurance. Deposit insurance will protect the deposits of customers should a bank become insolvent. Such an approach would significantly improve the resilience of the financial services sector. The Eastern Caribbean Central Bank has already taken the lead on this matter, and Grenada, together with other member states, will be guided by the ECCB in addressing this matter. Finally, Mr. President, the role and importance of credit unions and other non-bank financial institutions continues to grow. The nature and potential exposure of their business now requires a strengthening of their anti-money laundering and combating the financing of terrorism frameworks. This will be a focus of the Grenada Authority for the Regulation of Financial Institutions, GARFIN, during the period 2019. In addition, we're working with the ECCB to further strengthen the regulation and supervision of the non-bank financial institutions in Grenada. Moving on to infrastructural resilience. Mr. President, fiscal resilience and physical resilience are inextricably linked, which is why this government is pushing forward aggressively with its climate-smart, climate-resilient agenda, which includes the upscaling of investment in climate-resilient infrastructure. As a small island developing state, our vulnerability to climate change is real. We are on the front line of the war on climate change. These vulnerabilities are well documented. Our coastal communities are under threat from rising sea levels. Lives and property at risk from more frequent and more intense hurricanes. We can't forget Hurricanes Ivan and Emily, or the devastation wreaked across the region last year with Hurricanes Irma and Maria, Dominica, Barbuda, St. Martin, Martinique, and the BVIs. Mr. President, which one of us will be next? It's just a matter of time, and by the grace of God, we go. Short, intense rainfall causing extensive flooding, destroying farmers' crops, affecting our food security and the livelihoods of our people. Damage in infrastructure and property, homes, roads, bridges, and so forth. Extended periods of drought, water shortages, once again affecting agricultural production and threatening our basic human need for water, the fundamental basis of life. The loss of soil fertility and the desertification of our lands, again affecting agriculture. The acidification of our oceans, bleaching and destroying of our coral reefs that protect our shorelines from sea surges and provide a natural nursery for our fish. Our fishermen are seeing firsthand the effects of this on falling fish stocks. With increasing temperatures and changing weather patterns, we're seeing an increase in vector-borne diseases, Zika, dengue, CHIKV, impacting the health of our people. Mr. President, the list goes on. These projected impacts are expected to affect all aspects of Grenada's socio-economic landscape. Our exposure is extensive, impacting all areas of development as outlined above: human settlements, agricultural production, food supply, water supply, health, tourism, our economy. Mr. President, the gross injustice is that although as a small island developing state, we have contributed little to the cause of climate change, global warming, we are the unfortunate victims of its brutal realities. Climate change is real and here to stay. Therefore, we have no choice but to adapt to this new normal the very best way we can. Mr. President, the establishment of a dedicated Ministry of Climate Resilience, the first of its kind in the Caribbean, signals Grenada's leadership in taking a more strategic approach as to how we best adapt to climate change. The strategic approach that is being taken is both aggressive and ambitious, but also very pragmatic. Firstly, our strategy is founded on clear policy, derived from international frameworks such as the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UNFCCC, the governing body, and a plethora of international protocols. Some of our national policies underpinning our strategy include the recently developed National Climate Change Policy for Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique 2017 to 2021, the National Climate Change Adaptation Plan for Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique 2017 to 2021, our NAP, the Intended National Determined Contributions, our INDCs 2015, National Biodiversity Strategy Development Plan, the Environmental and Natural Resources Policy Framework, National Sustainable Development Plan 2030, the National Energy Policy, the Environmental and Natural Resources Policy Framework, and others. Mr. President, in order to strengthen our strategic approach, we have requested assistance from the IMF to conduct a climate change policy assessment for Grenada. This assessment shall take stock of our existing climate change policies and plans, as good as they are, from a macroeconomic perspective, identifying macro-relevant reforms that will improve our likelihood of success. This assessment will be carried out early in the new year. Through this climate change policy assessment and the strengthening of Grenada's resilience framework, we believe we will bolster our efforts in further mobilizing donor resources. Much needed. To date, Mr. President, our efforts are already being recognized. Grenada has been successful in securing a World Bank loan of $65 million at highly concessional rates to support climate and fiscal resilience. We've already received $30 million of that amount. Mr. President, if we break the FRL, Fiscal Responsibility Law, we would automatically lose the $35 million which is the remaining balance of that loan. A loan facility which is the first of its kind within the region. We also put in jeopardy the hundreds of millions of dollars that are potentially available to us in grant and concessional forms for further resilience building. No other country in the region has been able to access this loan facility because they have not satisfied the necessary fiscal requirements. Mr. President, our approach to fiscal responsibility is paying dividends. Mr. President, now to the pragmatic part of our strategic approach to climate change adaptation and building infrastructural resilience. Despite all of the overwhelming climate change, all of the overwhelming challenges climate change presents us with, it also offers us a massive opportunity. With all the current international attention and the financial and capacity building resources that are available for climate action, Grenada has an opportunity to strategically align available climate financing with our national development priorities, where appropriate, in areas such as agriculture, tourism, construction, transport, public and private building infrastructure, energy generation and distribution, forestry, water and sewage, communications infrastructure, health, education, social protection, ecosystems, financial services, coastal resources. Mr. President, the list goes on. One of the key mandates of the Ministry of Climate Resilience, together with the Ministries of Finance and Foreign Affairs, is resource mobilization. As such, a pipeline of bankable projects that can attract grant or highly concessional financing is being developed, which align to these priority areas to reduce our climate vulnerabilities. In doing so, we'll also be creating opportunities for further economic growth and the creation of more green jobs, or green jobs which will help to protect or restore our environment. So whether that is technicians putting solar panels in the renewable energy sector, construction workers who are trained in climate-smart building techniques, farm workers, climate-smart agriculture, policymakers, scientists, other technicians. These are all opportunities that exist for our young men and women here in Grenada. The development of the renewable energy sector, which we remain firmly committed to, will also create green jobs that will touch every economic sector of our country. Transitioning from fossil fuels to renewables will not only reduce our carbon emissions, a major contributor to global warming, but it will also significantly bring down the cost of electricity, which in turn will positively impact our economic performance. Opportunities, Mr. President. Mr. President, this government has already achieved a number of successes. Through the Green Climate Fund, Grenada has secured significant grant support for a number of transformative projects. These projects include the Grenada Climate Resilient Water Sector Project, or GCRUISE. With support from the German government, Grenada secured EC dollars $125 million in support that will make our water sector more climate resilient. The GCF Enhanced Direct Access Project, Grenada together with Antigua and Dominica have secured grant funding to the value of $45 million, which will provide grant support and soft loan facilities for communities, private sector, and government-based climate resilience initiatives. Climate Resilient City. This is a project funded by the GCF that will establish the town of St. George's as the first climate resilient city in the Caribbean. In addition, under the Global Environment Facility, GEF, Grenada is one of 10 Caribbean countries participating in a US $20.7 million project implemented jointly by UN Environment and UNDP. The GEF IWECO project provides an integrated approach to watersheds and coastal area management. Within the agriculture sector, the recently launched Climate Smart Agriculture Enterprise Project, CSAEP, a $38 million project that will implement climate smart agricultural practices and provide support for our farmers and our rural communities. Mr. President, I'll speak more to these projects when I present more substantively on the activities of the Ministry of Climate Resilience. The final elements I wish to speak on with regards to infrastructure resilience are building codes and land use policy. Addressing the shortcomings in our building codes and implementing a comprehensive land use policy are priorities of this administration. Working with the OECS Secretariat, we seek to review and standardize regional building codes. The goal will be to establish a common standard and building practices that will ensure properties, both domestic and commercial, are generally more durable and resilient to climate shock. This initiative will be supported by the implementation of the recommendations identified through the development of a national land use policy. Advancing social development. Mr. President, the third resilience tenet speaks to advancing social development. How we provide social policies and programs that protect our people, especially the most vulnerable amongst us. I shall speak briefly to the areas of housing, gender and family affairs, juvenile justice, social safety nets, national security, and pensions to public officers. My colleagues on this side will elaborate on some of these areas in more detail in their presentations when they come to present. But on housing, housing is one of the most pressing concerns for our most vulnerable. Up and down the country, speak community to community, housing, housing, housing. Therefore, the need to provide affordable access to decent housing and uplifting the housing standards for our people remains a top priority for this administration. To this effect, this government has constituted 12 housing work brigades throughout the country. The brigades are responsible for the repairs, construction, and rebuilding of houses for vulnerable citizens. This activity has not only addressed the housing needs for many, but has also created 180 new jobs within the brigade. Mr. President, work has started on the second phase of the Chinese low-income housing program, providing homes for a further 647 families. And they're in Busséju in St. George, Corinth in St. David, Diamond in St. Mark, the Villa in St. Patrick, and Dumfries in Carriacou. This is in addition to the 353 housing units that have already been handed over to families. Mr. President, 1,000 new homes. That's 1,000 families whose lives have been transformed by having the opportunity to own their own modern home and the creation of new and vibrant communities, fostering pride, dignity, and the upliftment of 1,000 families. This is a remarkable achievement by this new National Party administration. And this doesn't speak to the estimated $160 million that is being invested by the People's Republic of China in these housing projects. the boost to the local construction industry, and the employment of over 100 Grenadians on this project. In addition, Mr. President, there are also other initiatives in the pipeline to develop further low-income homes for hundreds more families across the country. We expect these initiatives to commence in 2019, once again recognizing the needs of our people and bringing them meaningful and tangible benefits. Mr. President, the government continues its efforts in combating domestic violence and sexually related crimes, particularly among our children. A number of measures have been put in place to tackle these serious issues, ranging from public awareness campaigns, the establishment of a special victims unit embedded within the Criminal Investigation Department of the RGPF, and the establishment of a sex offenders register. The necessary legislation which will underpin this initiative is scheduled to come to Parliament within the first half of 2019. Mr. President, this government remains committed to supporting our at-risk youth through implementing further improvements to our juvenile justice system, which includes the operationalization of the Grand Bacolet Juvenile Rehabilitation and Treatment Center. In addition, the rolling out of a number of programs designed for the rehabilitation of young offenders between the ages of 18 and 35 and their reintegration into society upon relief. Through the Actively Committed and Empowered Youth Community Project, ACE, further support for our at-risk youth is offered. This program provides valuable training in life skills, literacy, numeracy, and other personal development areas. The program runs for a period of 18 months and will make a positive impact on those young men and women most at risk and vulnerable. Social safety nets. Mr. President, in 2018, Grenada completed its Safety Net Advancement Project, which sought to strengthen our flagship social protection program, SEED. The outcomes included the expansion of coverage to poor and vulnerable households receiving support, improved delivery of educational services to poor children, and the improved health monitoring of vulnerable households. So the program strengthened as a clear output. Mr. President, a commitment was given and kept in the 2018 budget to increase payment to elderly households under the SEED program by $100. Once the fiscal space allows, further SEED payment increases will be considered, a further demonstration of our commitment to improving the lives of our people, especially those most vulnerable and those most in need. Health. Despite the many challenges and constraints, this government continues to work relentlessly to improve health care in this country. Mr. President, one of the major challenges that exists today is human resources within the health service. To this end, a human resources for health policy and plan for the health sector has been developed and will be implemented in 2019. This initiative will address critical areas such as recruitment, professional development, and succession planning for healthcare workers within the service. Physical infrastructure is another important area of focus. The second phase of construction of the General Hospital is scheduled for completion in 2019. In addition, work is about to commence on the reconstruction of the Gwarve Medical Center. Once complete, this will be a state-of-the-art health facility serving communities in St. John and St. Mark parishes. Under the Smart Healthcare Facilities in the Eastern Caribbean project, many of the 36 health facilities throughout Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique will undergo some form of climate-resilient technology upgrade. Mr. President, work has already started. In November this year, Princess Alice Hospital was successfully upgraded and commissioned. Today, Princess Alice is the first climate-resilient health facility within the OECS. The retrofitting of Hillsborough Health Centre and the Princess Royal Hospitals in Carriacou will commence second quarter of 2019. Ensuring more affordable access to and the more adequate funding of our healthcare system is being addressed through the introduction of national health insurance. The National Health Insurance Secretariat is now in full operation and is responsible for overseeing the effective implementation of national health insurance. To date, the Health Economics Unit of the University of the West Indies is providing technical assistance in developing a framework for NHI. Mr. President, it is of paramount importance that in addition to providing the best level of health care possible, NHI must be affordable and sustainable. National security. Mr. President, on the subject of national security, the safety and security of our people remains a top priority for this government. A safe and secure environment goes hand in hand with a strong and positive national development agenda. Grenada continues to have a low crime rate, one of the lowest in the world. Reported crime in Grenada contracted by 7% for the year to date, and the detection rate is around 74%. The responsiveness and effectiveness of the Royal Grenada Police Force must be applauded. Pensions for public officers. Mr. President, we can't speak to social development and social resilience without addressing the matter of pensions for public officers. However difficult these past few weeks have been between the unions and the government on the outstanding issues regarding the restoration and reform of the pension system for public workers, a way forward has been agreed by both parties. This way forward includes the submission of a new proposal by the government's Pension Engagement Committee, which is due today, and for negotiations to recommence later this week. Mr. President, the only way in which we are going to find a resolution is for all parties to constructively engage and to sit around the bargaining table. I therefore wish to say nothing today that would prejudice this latest accord. However, it would be remiss of me not to at least run through some of the irrefutable facts surrounding this matter. Mr. President, first and foremost, there is no dispute over the fundamental principles of pension restoration and reform for public officers. I repeat, there is no dispute on the fundamental principles. That principle being that this is a two-stage process, starting with the restoration of pensions to eligible public officers in accordance with the Hermelin-Armstrong Court judgment. This matter of restoration, which has frustrated workers and unions alike for 35 years, has now been successfully settled. Recently, the 56 workers affected by the Pension Disqualification Act of 1983 have received the agreed payment of $7.7 million. What past governments failed to do over the past 35 years, this administration has achieved and fulfilled the court's ruling to the letter. This is not insignificant, Mr. President. But this was only achieved through the combined efforts of the government and the unions within a positive spirit of cooperation and understanding. It is the same spirit of understanding that is required to complete the second phase, pension reform. Pension reform speaks to eligible public officers who were appointed to the service from February the 22nd, 1985, up to December the 31st, 2018. Mr. President, there is no legal requirement for government to do this. I repeat, there is no legal requirement for government to do this. It is government's commitment to doing what is morally just and fair as to why we have embarked on this challenging path, a path no other government has ventured down before. We didn't have to do this, Mr. President. With pension reform, the fundamental principle agreed here is that whatever reforms are made, they must be affordable and sustainable. And that the affordability and sustainability framework we must work within is enshrined in law and based on the fiscal responsibility rules that were passed in this very House. However, the demands by the unions for a 25% advance payment on pensions, what is being called a gratuity, within the 1958 pension law construct, which was disqualified, will cripple the country financially. Mr. President, having just completed a successful structural adjustment program, we can't return to where we were back in 2013. We can't throw away the progress made over the past 5 years, the shared sacrifice by all to stabilize the economy, the new opportunities that have been created for thousands, those that had jobs but no job security who now feel secure, those who were without work who now have jobs, the businesses that were struggling that are now doing much better, the new business owners who are just getting on their feet, the hundreds of millions of dollars in support we're still receiving from the international community that we could lose if we are not fiscally responsible. The hope that has been restored. Mr. President, we can't throw all of that away. The guiding principles for pension restoration and reform are laid out in a memorandum of understanding signed by all parties. There is no reference to an advance payment, the gratuity of 25% within that MOU. The definition of a gratuity is an advance pension payment in the form of a non-interest-bearing loan that has to be paid back to government over a period of 12 and a half years, considering the formula that obtains in the 1958 law. It is not a bonus payment. For workers who were appointed to an established position in the service between the period February 22nd, 1985, up to December 31st, 2018, the pension scheme will be non-contributory on the government's portion. By that I mean government will be responsible for making 100% of the pension contributions. This is unlike any other pension scheme. Usually the employee is expected to contribute also. This is a highly generous arrangement. Mr. President, without going into too much more detail, these are some of the key highlights to where we are today. I hope and pray that restraint and level heads prevail as discussions resume this week. The spirit that punctuated the positive industrial climate that carried us through some very difficult times over the past 5 years is the spirit that will get us through this current impasse. I am confident that once we all put what is in the best interest of all of Grenada first, that we will find a way forward. Transforming our economy. Mr. President, I've spoken to building resilience and advancing social development. I shall now turn my attention to the third component of this year's budget theme, transforming our economy. Here I shall speak to some of the key initiatives that underpin our resilience and social development efforts. I shall outline how we intend to drive government's sustainable economic development. I shall be supported by my colleagues on this side who will cover in their presentations infrastructure development, ICT, agriculture, youth development, disaster management, information, health, social development, housing, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. My presentation should cover climate resilience, forestry, fisheries, tourism, and aviation, education, human resource development. So I will start, Mr. President, with the Ministry of Climate Resilience. Mr. President, the budget for the Ministry of Climate Resilience, the Environment, Forestry, Fisheries, Disaster Management and Information is $22.4 million, a significant portion of which is grant funded, some $17 million.
Senator Steele, I don't want to stop you in flight, but just to indicate that you have 48 more minutes.
Thank you. The mandate of the ministry is resource mobilization across all of government. And its mandate also includes, as I said earlier, the taking a more strategic approach to climate change. I wish to recognize, first of all, the vision, the leadership of the Prime Minister in the creation of this new ministry, and also the significant dedication and contribution of my colleague ministers, Minister Garraway here, Minister Dabrio, plus our hard-working, dedicated P.S. Jessamy, who is there above us. Minister Garraway, as I said, will cover disaster management and information. Mr. President, I spoke earlier of some of the early successes within the ministry, and I will not go through them again. For example, the GCRUISE project, which is addressing some of the fundamental issues that we have within our water sector. We have, up in the north, instances of intense, excessive rain, but our inability to actually capture and store that. And then in the south, very drought-prone, an area which is highly urbanized and the center of our tourism sector. This project, Mr. President, will address through increasing our ability to capture rainfall, to store water in the north where it is produced, and then to distribute that throughout the country, especially to the south where it has the greatest demand. What is significant about this project is a $125 million project, the most significant portion of which is grant funded both through the Green Climate Fund and the government of Germany, plus contributions from Grenada. But through the implementation of this project, it will create opportunities for many of our workers. It's a significant infrastructural project. And the project is expected to start at the end of the first quarter of this year. Contract negotiations are being completed as we speak. The next significant project within the ministry is the Climate Resilient City Project, which will establish St. George's as the first climate resilient city within the region. This is with support from the GCF. It is still at the feasibility stage, but with support from New York University. But there are 9 critical interventions that are required, which will include which will, thank you, Mr. Deputy President, which will support the development of a promenade within the Carénage to protect the Carénage, highly vulnerable to sea level rise, addressing our sewage issues within the south, looking at the southern corridor between the town of St. George and the airport, some elements of that highly vulnerable to climate change. The Maurice Bishop International Airport, again at sea level, there are challenges with sea level rise in sections of that facility. Grenville, the coastal road, highly vulnerable, not in St. George's, but is included because of its high vulnerability. An urban plan for the town of St. George's, looking at issues such as congestion, identifying vulnerable communities, and putting measures in place to provide protections there. There is another project, a public street lighting project. Again, proposals are being developed right now with UN Environment, support from the Caribbean Development Bank, the GCF, and Grenlec, which will look at replacing sodium public bulbs in the public lights, which are highly consumptive of electricity. This project would expect to reduce our electricity consumption for public lighting by in the region of 60%. Our public lighting bill is somewhere in the region of $7 or $8 million a year, so that will provide significant savings for government. As we speak, there is a critical meeting that is taking place in Katowice in Poland right now, COP24. We have our Grenadian team of negotiators led by Dr. Spencer Thomas, Leon Charles, Roxy Hutchison, and Trevor Thompson, etc. Skilled, internationally respected climate negotiators, respected on the international stage. The significance of this COP is this puts into force the Paris Agreement, which underscores the actions, global actions that need to be taken in order to keep global temperatures down. And it comes at a time where there was a recent special report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, the 1.5 special report, which called for urgent and immediate action to be taken, greater ambition in global efforts to bring down global warming, and the need for direct and urgent action. A 12-year window for us to achieve that 1.5 degrees centigrade rise above pre-industrial levels. Mr. Deputy President, another recent development is the establishment of the Global Commission on Climate Adaptation. This is an entity a commission that has been established, led by Bill Gates, Ban Ki-moon, the former Director General of the United Nations, and the Dutch government, but with key government leaders also involved. Our Prime Minister is one of the commissioners, one of the conveners of this group. And they will have a global call for greater ambition in climate adaptation. It's climate adaptation that has the greatest benefit for us as a small island developing state, low carbon emitter, and the need for additional resources to be mobilized to achieve the targets that are needed. Moving on to some of the other initiatives within the ministry, plastics pollution. We recently passed in this very House legislation to ban the use of styrofoam and single-use plastics. The environmental impacts of these products are well known. They impact the health of our, whether it's our waterways, whether it's human health, whether it is fish, other livestock, consuming the particles that are broken down by these products. So an importation ban for styrofoam, which came into force the 1st of September, with a complete ban by the 1st of April 2019. Ban on single-use plastic bags, the ban will come into effect on the 1st of February next year, complete ban by February 2020, and then other single-use plastics, cutlery, food containers, plates, etc., etc. And Grenada is taking a leadership role, one of the first to institute such bans globally. We're working with our stakeholders. There are challenges, will be challenges, but we will prevail. In fisheries, Mr. Deputy President, we're seeing in 2018 a marginal increase in the fish stocks that are being landed, a 2% increase. The fishing sector, although it is still a very significant contribution to our economy, have seen challenges in recent times. The influx of sargassum has impacted the level of growth that we have enjoyed in previous years, and again highlights the impact of climate change. Sargassum is a direct result of changes in sea temperatures. In terms of the MPAs, we have an ambitious goal of establishing 25% of our near-shore, or putting under protection 25% of our near-shore coastline. We are getting closer to that target. with a plan in 2019 to include 2 additional marine protected areas, one in Wharf, the second in Leverett. The other notable thing to mention within fisheries is the introduction of an insurance policy for the fisheries sector, COAST, Caribbean Oceans Asset Sustainable Facility, which will, in the event of weather-related, climate-related issues, will provide some financial protections for the sector. But this is a pilot, and support of our fishermen will be required to ensure the sustainability of this project. Work will continue in the area of improving the level of quality within the fisheries sector, whether it is training for a HACCP certification for the export of fish, whether it is in food handling, the handling of the fish to ensure that we are able to export the highest quality and premium product that Grenada is known for. On the forestry side, Forestry and National Parks Department will continue projects and programs aiming at the preservation and management of our forestry resources. And a key element of that, Mr. Deputy President, is the protection of our watersheds. Mr. President, moving on to the Ministry of Education, Human Resource Development and Religious Affairs. The budgetary requirement, the budgetary allocation for the Ministry of Education is $112.1 million, 10% of our total expenditure, which is the highest single allocation for a sector. The key work programs within the ministry are focused around the critical areas of strengthening the capacity of our teachers and students, the rehabilitation and maintenance of our educational institutions, improved management and operational efficiency, as well as the enhanced professionalism among education practitioners, the integration of ICT, increased focus in educational opportunities in the area of technical and vocational training, equitable access for all to quality education for all that is also relevant. Mr. President, Deputy President, I wish to start with strengthening capacity and support for our teachers. Mr. Deputy President, the importance of our teachers and the critical role they play in our schools and communities cannot be overstated. In addition to their fundamental role of imparting knowledge and providing educational support for their students, a good teacher can be a mentor, can inspire, positively influence, and change the lives of individual students. A good teacher is a role model, not only in their classrooms and schools, but their communities also. Therefore, ensuring our teachers are able to fulfill their potential is of critical importance. With all the resource constraints that exist, this government has always done the very best it can to provide as much support as it can to our teachers, whether through training opportunities or increased benefits and financial support. To this end, the training and support given to our teachers has always been a priority. And when we came into office in 2013, we recognized many of the capacity gaps and many of the long-standing challenges that the teaching profession faced. Some of that support provided in recent times includes the regularization of teachers. When we came into office in 2013, there were 605 temporary teachers. Some of those teachers were unestablished for 15 years, Mr. Deputy President. And what is notable is many administrations had the opportunity to do something about that. As a temporary teacher, there is no job security. There is a lack of entitlement to benefits of established teachers, financially, in terms of training, in terms of personal development, other benefits. They have challenges in securing loans and mortgages. But of the 605 temporary teachers today, some 500 have now been regularized. Every teacher regularized received 2 salary increments and a retroactive payment of 1 year. The cost to government for this is well over $1 million. In terms of training, ensuring our teachers receive the best possible training and development, critical improving teacher learning outcomes for our children. So since 2013, over 150 teachers have received full-time training to associate degree level at a cost of $7 million in study leave payments. Training for our teachers is ongoing. A significant number of teachers have attended St. George's University and other universities to further their studies, having been granted study leave and access to higher education for them to further their skills is also ongoing. Hundreds more have benefited from many specialist training programs in areas such as early childhood learning, leadership, literacy, numeracy, phonics, and other developmental programs, all critical to improving teaching learning outcomes of children, Mr. Deputy President, benefit. Under the Grenada Education Enhancement Program, GEEP, valued at $40 million, it provides significant training and development for our teachers and principals at all levels. 120 principals and deputy principals are receiving leadership training. 750 teachers to receive literacy and numeracy training. As throughout the region, we know the challenges that we have with regard to literacy and numeracy rates. Over 240 teachers have received training to date. 59 teachers will receive a bachelor's degree level training, again, beyond the associate degree. We have a long way still to go, Mr. Deputy President, but it cannot be disputed that we have started to tackle some of these challenging issues that have existed within the teaching service for many, many years. Now onto school infrastructure, again under the GEEP program. Temporary accommodation and relocation for students at the Grenada Seventh-day Adventist Comprehensive is ongoing as a new building block. The building of a new block will start. Construction is expected to start early next year. The additional technical and vocational training block at Presentation Brothers College is in the stage of tendering, so significant upgrades to those schools, and the finalization of the design for the Bishop's College in Carriacou is underway. Designs are currently underway for the construction of 3 schools: St. Andrew's Anglican Primary, St. David's Secondary, and Grenada Christian Academy. Construction is expected to start sometime in 2019. And then under the BNTF project, St. Teresa's in Vincennes pre-primary, construction of those were completed. Land secured for the construction of the Paradise pre-primary school, Happy Hill, Rizan pre-primary school. The addition of 13 primary school libraries has been completed, and this is part of a project with the Grenada Schools Incorporated, who are a private entity who are working with us to provide a library in every single primary school within the country. Now, just touching on exam performance, of greatest significance here is the improvement seen in the areas of English and maths. English A, we saw move from 776 passes in 2017 to 1,012 in 2018. That's a 30.4% increase. And then in mathematics, we've seen an increase from 372 passes to 580 in 2018, an increase of 56%. Significant achievement there, knowing all of the challenges that exist with numeracy and literacy. Moving on to human resource development, just 2 areas. Scholarships. Grenada continues to provide unprecedented levels of scholarships to our young men and women. 173 scholarships for 2018 were awarded at a value at some $49 million. That's just in 1 year. And since we came into office in 2013, some 1,200 scholarships have been awarded to our young men and women. This is unprecedented, Mr. President. Just touching on skills development, the government's focus on skills development is not just about academics. It is about identifying abilities within our young men and women, tying those abilities, those capabilities to the developmental needs, our national priorities in technical and vocational areas. And as such, the development of a skills development unit within the Ministry of Education to push that agenda. And one of the first outcomes from that is the establishment of a National Skills Development Institute in Snell Hall in St. Patrick, which will focus on working with our young men and women in the production of furniture that will be supplied to our schools and other government institutions. So providing skills development, providing work opportunities, but in addition to that, the output of high value to the education sector. And the plan will be to have 2 additional centres established in 2019. So, Mr. Deputy President, moving on to the Ministry of Civil Aviation, the budget allocation there, $21,476,866. Arrival statistics. For the first 10 months of 2018, we've seen, again, significant growth, both in terms of stayover arrivals, 10.5% increase, cruise arrivals, 27% increase, yachting arrivals have increased by 11.8%. And this is due to increased, the more aggressive approach by the GTA, by the Ministry of Tourism, in terms of its marketing of Grenada as a destination. Its strong digital presence, FAM trips, 51 international journalists visited Grenada this year, significant trade shows, working closely with the private sector, working with a lot of the properties, with Sandals, Spice Island Beach Resort, Mount Cinnamon, etc., in terms of marketing the destination of property. Before it can even market itself, it needs to promote the destination. We have seen significant travel awards over this period, whether it's Expedia, whether it is Grand Anse being the best Caribbean beach within the region, awards for individual properties. Grenada is the must-visit destination within the Caribbean right now. Cruise tourism, significant increases there. We're working with consultants looking at how to develop, make recommendations as to how to develop the product so we can further strengthen our position there. And in terms of product development, many community-based projects up and down the country, again, getting our visitors out of the St. George's area, up and around the country. Significant increases in room stock. The creation, either new properties under construction, new properties coming on stream, such as the world-class Silver Sands resort opening that we saw just a couple of weeks ago. The expansion of whether it's True Blue Resort, Koana Bay, which will come on stream at some point in the 2019-2020. Airlift, significant increases again in airlift, Air Canada, American Airlines, Liat, Sunwing. It continues. So, Mr. Deputy President, we're seeing in one of our critical economic sectors significant growth and significant development. Mr. President, I will now briefly touch on some other key economic areas. Construction. Firstly, the construction sector is on course to expand for a 4th consecutive year with a growth rate of 14.9% in 2018, with an increase of 26.7% in the value of construction materials imported, which is a key indicator of the vibrancy of that sector. Private education, accounting for 19.3% in 2017 and of our GDP, and that predominantly is St. George's University. And we're seeing with increasing numbers of students to St. George's University, that growth rate increasing. Support to small business development. Mr. Deputy President, support for small business development since coming into office in 2013 has again been unprecedented. To date, 1,724 applications have been received, with 748 existing businesses and 517 new businesses benefiting, positively impacting over 1,000 workers. Other sectors, positive growth is expected in 2018 for the wholesale and retail trade sector and the transport sector, with projected rates of 10.8% and 11.6% respectively, with strong performances in the construction and tourism sectors fueling this. Additionally, the manufacturing sector grew by 2% in 2018, continuing from 2.7% in 2017. Regarding petroleum development, Mr. Deputy President, the initial test drilling phase is now completed, and the planning for the next drilling phase of 2 additional test wells is about to commence. The results of these test wells will determine the commercial viability of these fields and inform as to the next steps with regard to further exploration and development. Mr. Deputy President, I will now move to the major public sector projects. These projects are carried out by the Ministry of Infrastructural Development under the government's Public Sector Investment Programme, and is one of the key economic drivers and the foundation for Grenada's economic and social development. Given the historical low implementation rates of government projects, a new division of implementation that is adequately staffed with the required skill sets to ensure efficient and effective implementation of projects has been established. Mr. President, the list of public projects is extensive, so I'm going to just quickly flow through it. However, the point is that the pipeline of projects is substantial, and the scale and impact of them collectively is of significant value, not only in terms of financial investment, but also in terms of national infrastructural development, roads, bridges, public buildings, etc. And of course, Mr. President, Deputy President, all important jobs. So first of all, the Houses of Parliament, we're here enjoying it right now. Phase 2 of this project will commence. We are in the process of securing donations of some $2 million to complete phase 2 of the project, which will see some improvements to the outside of the grounds here. Maurice Bishop International Airport, a concessional loan of $66 million received from the People's Republic of China for this project, which will include things such as runway rehabilitation, the bypass road for the airport, and a new taxiway retrofitting of and the expansion of the current terminal. So some significant improvements we will see there. Restoration of government buildings, $10 million will be invested in the course of 2019, looking at upgrading many of the buildings, unused, disused buildings that exist. Grove Medical Center, $7 million project, ground has already broken there. St. Patrick's Road Network, $27 million, 350 jobs created. UK CIF, $46.7 million, 350 jobs created. Grenada Agricultural Feeder Roads, $101.8 million there, 400 jobs created. The Grove Extreme Rainfall Project, estimated at $27.7 million. The St. John River Flood Mitigation Project, estimated at $12.2 million. Road improvements, Mr. Deputy President. Mr. Deputy President, the government has reintroduced the Environmental Warden Crews, which will provide continuous road maintenance to include drainage, cutting of overhangs, culverts, cleaning, and maintenance of public facilities and public spaces such as cemeteries, community centres, and beaches. And it's expected to create somewhere in the region of 400 jobs. This will complement the seasonal debushing programme, which will employ 2,810 persons during the course of the year. And then the ongoing maintenance of our roads, asphalt and concrete roads, maintaining and repairing our roads, our drains, our culverts, and improving our road infrastructure. That will continue in 2019 with the employment of 430 persons. The list goes on, Mr. Deputy President. Moving to private sector projects. Mr. Deputy President, We've just heard of all of these significant public sector projects, creating opportunities for some 2,000 Grenadians. But it's not the responsibility of government alone to provide opportunities for our people. This new National Party government fundamentally believes its role is to create an enabling environment for growth and job creation, and that the engine for growth should be the private sector. Mr. President, investor confidence remains strong. Grenada is one of the places in the Caribbean region for investment. The Grenada Investment Development Corporation continues to see growing levels of investment from both local and foreign investors in all key sectors. In terms of existing projects approved prior to 2018, the GIDC continues to support ongoing projects valued at over $350 million in local investments. As of September this year, 47 new applications for investment incentives were received, and 41 projects being approved for incentive support, 23 of which are within the tourism sector, 14 in the manufacturing sector, and 4 in the service sector. The value of these projects within this pipeline is $272 million, creating approximately 800 jobs. Mr. Deputy President, as with the public sector projects, I'll just quickly run through some of the key private sector projects. The Village in the Blue, $154 million EC project, an extended stay hotel, creating 140 permanent jobs. Star Development Limited, a 60-room luxury hotel above Dr. Groom's Beach, $56 million, creating employment for 15 permanent persons. True Blue Bay Resort, one of our great properties here, the expansion upgrade of this existing property, 24 new units, $10 million invested, 40 additional jobs. Ace Holdings, the construction of 50 apartments in True Blue, $14 million, creating 70 construction jobs, 10 permanent jobs. Virgin Beach Development, this project involves the construction of 128-bedroom student accommodation in True Blue, $40 million invested, 80 persons employed. Homer Limited, a luxury resort with 240 rooms, $60 million invested, the creation of 40 permanent jobs. Waldorf Apartments, 108 single-unit apartments in True Blue, $25 million invested, construction, 150 persons during that construction phase. These are but a few projects. I've not spoken of the recent opening of the $130 million Silver Sands Resort, complementing properties such as Spice Island Beach Resort as one of the finest properties in the Caribbean. And the investor committed to building 2 more world-class properties in Grenada. The area of agro-processing, Aqua Natural, a $5 million EC water bottling operation, will provide work for 30 persons once operational. Mount Plaisir Estate, with crop production, agro and processing facilities, $8.1 million invested, employing 29 persons. Synergia Incorporated, a hydroponics, very innovative project, $750,000 invested, employing 13 persons. Mr. Deputy President, the list goes on. Investment, job opportunities, opportunities for all, Mr. President. Mr. Deputy President, I now move on to other budgetary measures. Mr. President, one of the fundamental principles of a new National Party administration is to ensure that as much of every dollar an individual or business earns as is fiscally responsible remains at their disposal. However, this principle must always be balanced against the fundamental responsibility of each and every one of us to pay our fair share in order to support our national development needs, support public services, and ensuring adequate safety nets are available for our most vulnerable. Mr. President, the promise made coming out of the Homegrown Structural Adjustment Programme was that with shared sacrifice becomes shared benefit once the fiscal space allows. Government's commitment to this promise has already been demonstrated in previous budgets. For 2019, the following budgetary measures apply. An increase in ex gratia payments to a minimum of EC $350 commencing in January 2019. This would result in an increased incomes for 280 persons. Commencing from the tax period 2019, personal income tax will be reduced to 28% for incomes in excess of $5,000 per month. Similarly, corporate tax will be reduced to 28%. Mr. President, this tax break will help to stimulate the local economy, putting more disposable income in the hands of workers and for companies, affording them extra capital to potentially reinvest and grow their businesses. Mr. Deputy President, government will make a financial provision to start settling outstanding payments to claimants who would have successfully secured judgments against the government. The US $30 million loan received on concessionary terms from the World Bank makes provision for government to reduce public debt. As such, a portion of the funds will be used to compensate such claimants. Mr. President, Deputy President, government in partnership with the Grenada Hotel and Tourism Association, the Grenada Tourism Authority and the Grenada Development Bank, support for small indigenous hoteliers will be provided in the form of a soft loan facility at the Grenada Development Bank. The revolving fund will finance training and marketing programs to support the efforts of small hotels that are members of the Hotel Association. An initial $3 million will be made available for this program. So in closing, Mr. Deputy President, the 2019 budget builds on the foundations laid by the previous New National Party administration. A solid foundation born from the shared national sacrifice made to turn this economy around. From one of the weakest economies in the region to the strongest. Protecting jobs and creating new job opportunities for thousands. And providing a vision of economic growth, infrastructural and social development within a sustainable development frame. Mr. Deputy President, this is a balanced budget, grounded in sound fiscal management principles. A budget that responsibly builds on strong economic and fiscal performance. A budget that supports growth and job creation. A budget that provides more opportunities for our youth. A budget that supports improved access to healthcare. A budget that supports greater educational opportunities for our children and our youth. A budget that provides more housing and housing assistance for those in need. A budget that supports more support for the agricultural sector and our rural communities. A budget that protects our most vulnerable. A budget that provides additional support for our elderly. And a budget that supports businesses and business development. A budget that best meets the needs of the people of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. Mr. Deputy President, it's for these reasons I commend this motion to this honourable House. I thank you.
Okay, thank you, Leader of the House. Leader of Government Business, sorry. The next speaker would be Honorable Glennis Roberts, and you would have your 1 hour, and the 15 minutes would be at the discretion of the President. So you can start. Glennis Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy President. Wait.
The President, in the chair.
Thank you, Dr. Campbell. Yes. Madam Senator, just a brief note that would indicate the degree of sophistication that we have achieved in Parliament, and it's an equal opportunity Parliament, so to speak, in that for the very first time in our parliamentary history, we are now broadcasting the proceedings of the Parliament in sign language, so that those who are hearing impaired can follow these proceedings. And I would wish to congratulate the clerk and his deputy for the efforts made in this regard, and of course relying on the high-tech nature of the Parliament. So I think it's a proud day for us, and it's a proud day for me, presiding over for the first time a so-called equal opportunity Parliament, and that all citizens, hopefully at some point in the future, the technology will allow us to communicate our proceedings to the visually impaired. But a step at a time, we are getting there. Senator, the Most Honorable Glennis Roberts, a veteran of the Parliament, it's now your opportunity to add your contribution to the debate. I did hear the standing presiding officer indicate that the 15 minutes is at my discretion. Well, I've already indicated that I will surrender the discretion, and everyone who wishes to access that 15 minutes can do so at your own pleasure. Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to say it's also historic, before I start my presentation, that the person doing sign language is my daughter-in-law. All right. Mr. President, I wish to commence my presentation with the words as it's written in Revelation 1:3, and I quote, "Blessed is he who reads, and those who hear the words of the prophecy, and heed the things which are written in it, for the time is near." I am drawn to this scripture as the Bible documents the time of natural disasters that are currently confronting us. Mr. President, the Minister of Finance presented the 2019 budget on the pillars of the theme: building resilience, advancing social development, transforming our economy. This theme, in my view, captures the urgency of now, and as we are witness to the devastating impacts of natural disasters that are brought about by climate change and fueled by man-made actions. Accordingly, my commentary in this honorable House would address my observation that mirrors the thematic areas as was presented by the Prime Minister. Therefore, I move to building resilience. Mr. President, while the budget addressed some of the key areas that will assist in the resilience framework for 2019, it is my expressed hope that the focus of some of these key areas go beyond 2019. Mr. President, allow me to delve into a few of those areas in more details. 1. infrastructural resilience. The heightened consciousness of ensuring that our physical infrastructure can withstand the effects of climate change, though very necessary, must be complemented by actions that safeguard the environment. While I support the express commitment by the government to address the deficiencies in building codes and implementing a land policy over the medium term, as these are necessary pillars for any modern society, we must act in urgency of now. And it starts with me, it starts with you. Changing our habits. Let's stop burning plastics. Let's use more paper. Let's use shopping bags. Let's recycle. And as I listen to Senator Steele speak about the environmental wardens, I want to warn that while you cut overhangings, do not butcher the trees. The trees, you know, a couple months ago, Mr. President, I was almost died coming over Grandance on the far edge. All the overhangings went. The overhangings also act as protection for people who do not have vehicles that wait for buses. So let's please, as we have the wardens, let's try to see how we can do better to mitigate against the devastation of climate change. Mr. President, we must hasten our steps towards renewable energy. I note that the 2019 budget listed a few projects that seeks to advance this cause, but so did the 2018 and 2017 budgets. Therefore, Mr. President, we must make a concerted effort to improve the rate of implementation of these very important projects. As such, I was happy to see a dedicated project that seeks to build capacity in the area of project implementation and management. Moreover, I must commend the government for securing funding to address the many challenges related to sustainable water and land management issues through the Integrating Water, Land, and Ecosystem Management Project. This is absolutely necessary for a small island developing state like Grenada. However, last night on the news I saw Mount Hartman higher part suffering from water, and with the rainfall that we have in November, I think it's crucial that the government look to see how we can capture and harvest more rainwater so that we can minimize the challenges that these people have in the high areas. I mean, a project can be done in a community like that with all the funds that you have, so that when the rains are heavy in November, November is our wettest month, I think, according to the Met Office, that we can mitigate that problem. Mr. President, while I did not hear any specific mention of the steps that the government is undertaking to protect and preserve the environment as a mitigating strategy to combat the effects of climate change, I note that steps are being taken given the most recent ban of styrofoam products. Additionally, the wardens designated to take care of the marine protected area. That is timely. However, more can be done, and I wish to encourage the government to amplify its effort in this regard, because what I'm noticing in the area that I live, the mangroves are just going for development. Yes, development is key. Price of progress is always high, but we need to find ways when we take down to put back in. Mr. President, we cannot seriously address the issue of resilience if we fail to develop a business continuity and disaster recovery plan for the state in the event of a devastation. I have not seen any evidence of the President would outline the processes and techniques used to help the country recover from a disaster and continue to resume routine operations. It should be published and known to all government agencies. Mr. President, for any resilience framework, we must be proactive, and therefore I believe this form of planning is needed. Have some water, please. I now turn to fiscal resilience. Mr. President, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and other regional and international organizations have dubbed Grenada's homegrown structural adjustment program a success. This is evident not merely by the growth numbers published by the Ministry of Finance, but more so in the activities that we see in the area of construction and otherwise throughout the island. Therefore, Mr. President, I fully support legislating financial management parameters that ensures that the government is managing the people's business appropriately. While some may criticize this law, I believe as a people we must delve deeper in what it seeks to achieve, Mr. President. My understanding of this legislation is that it seeks to provide a rules-based framework that ensures the prudent management of the nation's resources through greater accountability and transparency in fiscal operations, among other provisions. Therefore, it requires the emphasis of greater productivity on both the public and private levels, for as the gross domestic product of the country improves, revenue improves, which allows for other areas of spending to increase. This makes perfect sense, Mr. President. With stagnant or negative growth, revenues would decrease, and therefore spending should not expand. And so, the parameters of this legislation, in my lay view, is logical. The inclusion, Mr. President, of buffers or contingency that would address shocks is a noteworthy observation. Mr. President, I wish to caution the government to use surpluses realized wisely. In our individual lives, we understand that excesses should be invested in productive activities. Some saved for rainy days, and some may be used to pay down on debt obligations. Mr. Speaker, I encourage the government to apply this simple approach to using surpluses of the state. The stride made towards fiscal prudence must be sustained. Although fiscal prudence is well placed as a pillar of resilience, and therefore it fits within the content of the theme of the 2019 budget, the issues that are addressed under this thematic area goes beyond 2019. Mr. President, these issues are the core of our economic survival and should not be taken lightly. I wish to shift my focus to advancing social development. Mr. President, while the government has made significant strides in the area of economic growth alone, Mr. President, cannot sufficiently address the issue of inequitable distribution of wealth. As such, economic policy should be complemented with the appropriate social reform policy interventions which empowers the individual to be productive agents in the economy and ultimately in the society. A comprehensive approach to human development means more investment in education, more investment in health, in sports, housing, and other human capital services. That being said, Mr. President, in the area of housing, it is well known that state lands are becoming more scarce, while there is an urgent need to provide more housing for our people. As such, it would be important for the government to consider apartment complexes in design when addressing the provision of housing support for our citizens. This approach can assist with the land space issue that confronts us. However, they should be designed with green initiatives to assist our environmental thrust, meaning that when we have these complexes, we leave areas where people can do their backyard gardening, they can do other things as we look towards housing. Further, consideration can be given to provide soft loan facilities to the Grenada Development Bank for persons who have land tenure and looking to build. Mr. President, As it relates to matters pertaining to gender and family affairs, I wish to touch on the issue of child sexual abuse and domestic abuse. While I support the establishment of the Special Victims Unit, we must attack this scourge at a household level. Our teachers, Mr. President, need to be trained to identify changes in the behavior patterns of the children at the school level, likewise our parents. We need more secured homes for our girls who are assaulted. Mr. President, only recently I saw in the news a report of a police officer charged with sexual assault of a young lady in his care. This, Mr. President, is unacceptable. Background checks on workers, protocols and policies for supervision must be established. The Minister of Social Development, the Honorable Delma Thomas, in her budget presentation, made mention of the sex offenders register coming to this Honorable House in the first half of 2019. Mr. President, I look forward to that day. We must name and shame the perpetrators and protect our young ones. There was a notable increase of $2.5 million for the Ministry of Social Development in the 2019 provisions, relative to what obtained in 2018. Mr. President, I therefore expected that the funds be strategically used to address some of our social needs. Mr. President, so putting our efforts in protecting our people from abuse and any form of criminal activities is an efficiently functioning justice system and an effective police force. Mr. President, I wish to register in this Honorable House commendations to our men and women in uniform that work assiduously to ensure that Grenada remains safe. We are still considered one of the safest places in the Caribbean, and dare I say the world, and we wish to keep it that way. However, our justice system must work for us. I listened with keen interest as members of the judicial fraternity clamored for adequate accommodation to hold the various sessions. Mr. President, while this is necessary, the current theme for this budget suggests that we should be seeking to conduct hearings and the associated paperwork via electronic means. We must move to an era of digitization. And I dare say here, I was speaking to a lawyer recently who said that he was able to file a case with the CCJ from a living room and be able to get a case heard via internet. Because what I did when we had the issue with the CCJ was to do a session in my community in Woburn on the CCJ. So I think that was a missed opportunity. Nevertheless, Mr. Speaker, I want to encourage the government to review its approach to resolving this issue by exploring more innovative options that may be available. Mr. President, to advance social development, the issues in our health sector must be addressed. This is a complex problem with no quick fix, but rather it requires a national dialogue. It is therefore necessary that the state encourages and provides the avenues to have the conversation around healthcare. We must ascribe to the universal attributes that defines the quality healthcare system. Namely, it must be safe, meaning avoiding harm to patients from the care that is intended to help. Being effective, to providing services based on scientific knowledge to all who could benefit and refraining from providing services to those not likely to benefit. Meaning we need to avoid underuse and misuse respectively. We must ascribe to being patient-centered, which is providing care that is respectful of and responsive to individual patient preferences, needs, and values, and ensuring that patient values guide all clinical decisions. It should be timely, reducing waits and sometimes harmful delays for both those who receive and those who give care. It should be efficient, avoiding waste, including waste of equipment, supplies, ideas, and energy. Mr. President, it should be equitable, providing care that does not vary in quality because of personal characteristics such as gender, ethnicity, geographic location, and socio-economic status. These attributes must conform the basis which we measure our achievements in the healthcare system. The building of smart healthcare facilities should not just capture amenities that resist the impact of climate change, but a truly smart facility would model the attributes that measures quality care. Mr. President, I observe an increase of $5.6 million in the health sector, and I trust that the added funds will be used in strategic areas that advances the attributes that defines quality health. Mr. President, I think the time has come for us in Grenada to have to stop doing motorcades to help people to raise funds to go abroad. We have an international school here that part of its mandate, its medicine. We have to find a way. Every week somebody is sick and has to run. If you can't run, your family dies. Mr. President, this is something we have to define quality health care. There is no quick fix to complex challenges, Mr. President. We all just have to lend our voices to issues, but offer workable solutions that government can adopt. The attempt of government to provide a national health insurance for all citizens is a noble venture, but the quality of the service must also be assured. So this is something we should really push towards, Mr. President. Therefore, Mr. President, I call on health practitioners to enter the halls of our health facilities with the love and compassion for service to humanity, and it would be reflective in your delivery. Mr. President, I will not delve into the issue of pension to public officers. However, I would like to place on record that I applaud the parties for returning to the negotiating table, and we look forward to a resolution in the interest of Grenada. However, just a bit of warning that in our quest to fix, we must respect each other and think of everyone in the process. The nagging issue, I think, Mr. Speaker, recently is a deduction of teachers' salary. Though it may seem just to some, teachers do go overboard and beyond to provide not only education, but care for our children. In this very budget, we spoke of regional accomplishments that these teachers made this year in most of the subjects. So I want to say, while we are advancing, our economy is advancing, investors are coming, please do not let the situation go overboard that all our accomplishments are eroded in this little window. So I want to please urge, even if you want to take a day or 2 days, it is not right because teachers also have families and need to look after their children. And there are some households that have mother is a teacher, father is a teacher, children teaching. Let us be sober. I'm not judging, but I know you have money to pay their salaries, so give them back a little bit because they need to take care of their families. That's my intervention here. Okay, I now turn my focus on transforming the economy. Transforming the economy. Mr. President, I was pleased that public sector modernization was featured as an activity that can transform the economy. Mr. Speaker, public sector modernization is a concept that has been around for decades. Clearly, there is an obvious need for the remodeling of the public service to ensure that it is fit to service the needs of this new era. While the government expressed the view of digitization as a priority, we must also consider the ways to improve productivity by introducing performance-based system in our public service. Mr. President, it is counterproductive to provide increases and increments to workers across the board. There is not a culture that we should this is not a culture we should continuously promote. I call on my union colleague in this honorable house to look into this issue and change the mode of negotiations. We are no longer on the plantation. Mr. President, we are in the 21st century that requires alterations of the tactics, such as we remove the wig. I feel very strong in my belief that we should adjust to the times. A modern public service requires a change in the way we do business. This, Mr. President, must be addressed. Mr. President, in the area of human resource development, I was happy to see the expressed intent to establish skill centers across the island. This is an excellent initiative that can assist our people with sustainable jobs. And additionally, in many of the schools, we have programs like JA, Junior Achievers. They do excellent projects. However, these projects die by the time they leave Form 4 to Form 5. So this, I think, is really key. However, Mr. President, there is a need to relook our curriculum to ensure that it is fit for the purpose. Our school system currently fosters more workers than business owners. Therefore, we must move away from the traditional approach to education and invest heavily in skills development. The Minister of Education, in a presentation, informed the nation of the quantum of money spent in education for this year. Further, a $5.8 million increase was observed this year relative to last year. Mr. President, we must ensure that we receive returns on investment made. I say this to say that our bonding system must be tightened and scholarships must be aligned to national priorities. Further, Mr. President, national priorities must be informed by a clear vision of where we want to take this country. This takes me to the point of the National Development Plan for Grenada. Excuse me. I noted that the budget was prepared on the pillars of the government's medium-term agenda, or MTA. This agenda would have been ideally grounded in a national plan. And so, Mr. President, while I commend the efforts of the government, it is important to bring all necessary pieces together to allow for a global view that would allow us to chart the way forward in a more systematic way. Mr. President, it is obvious that the engagement of our youth is critical, as the demographics of Grenada is predominantly youths. I wish to highlight a few initiatives that were announced that requires more details. The Youth in Agriculture project, while it sounds good, looks like a good project, not much information is provided on same. Therefore, I request my colleagues on the other side to give us more information on this project. The concept of business support centers to assist persons, again, appears to be an excellent initiative. However, more details must be provided on the financing and longevity of these centers. Mr. President, it is obvious that our investment articles are heavily concentrated to the south of the island. It would be important for government to encourage and incentivize investments in the rural parts of the island that would offer a more even distribution of the investment activities. And in addition, we will see some migration from up down, and a lot of families will stay intact and communities can be built. In this regard, Mr. President, I was extremely excited to hear the Prime Minister announce a rural development unit. As expressed by the Prime Minister, the office would house the two poverty reduction projects of the government, namely the Basic Needs Trust Fund, BNTF, and the Climate Smart Agriculture and Rural Enterprise Program, SIPE. Mr. President, it is my expressed view that the mandate of this office goes beyond these two projects to assess the needs of the rural communities and design programs and advise on policies that directly addresses those needs in a targeted way. I believe that it is the start of something good and we should build on it. Mr. President, in the area of tourism, it has been reported that this year there was a record high in tourist arrivals. It means that we must do something right. We must be doing something right. While this may be the case, we must seek to continuously address the issue of room stock on our tourism sites. Mr. President, I wish to humbly suggest that the government establish a mechanism that ensures that the large number of student-type accommodation facilities that is developing in the south of the island is done to a standard that can accommodate visitors in the down period for the students of the university. Mr. President, I believe that it is necessary to complement the room stock available in our hotels. The work that is being done with air, bed and breakfast must continue as it supports and improves the room stock in a creative way. Mr. President, I am hopeful that in 2019, we can truly see the commencement of work to relocate the police headquarters. Understanding that security is a 24-hour job, we must properly map the process for this transition in a very structured manner. This move, Mr. President, would give way for the refurbishment of our fort as a tourist attraction site. Additionally, Fort Frederick and Matthew should be attended to. Mr. President, the branding of sun, sea, and sand must be complemented by adventurous activities that fits the millennial. Adults of that generation was raised and is being raised in the digital era, and therefore their attraction to a destination would most likely be fueled by adventure. Consideration should be given to this niche and catering to their needs. Mr. President, before I conclude, I wish to offer some brief commentary on the budgetary measures that were announced by the Prime Minister in his budget statement. The minimum increase in ex gratia is a welcome initiative as it seeks to provide more income in the hands of our people. We are certain, Mr. President, that the much-needed increase will be spent in Grenada. Additionally, the reduction in the personal income tax and corporate tax to 28% would also provide additional disposable income to the working class and the business community for investment. These measures, Mr. President, in the words of the Minister of Finance, would allow the average man fiscal space to do more things that they could have done before. And may I add here, as it's now topical, excuse, salary for parliamentarians and ministers, I support. And I will add that all levels of salary in Grenada needs to be reviewed. The minimum wage for domestic help, store clerk, all need a review. We try as a nation and as a people, but we need to stop, reflect, review where we are, and work together for all. Because I came into this house in 2003, and the salary is the same today. This is how many years? 15. So it is it is just for the parliamentarians and ministers. I support that, but I also support that all levels in Grenada, we need to review it, private and public. Mr. President, any action that provides more disposable income to the average man, I am in line to lend my full support. In conclusion, Mr. President, I must admit that in general terms, the government has made strides and the budget does support some key development agendas. However, more has to be done in the areas where deficiencies were highlighted. I want to personally congratulate Dr. Mitchell on his steadfastness in representing people, notable for 35 years in this parliament. What an accomplishment. Please, though, Dr. Mitchell, as you enter into the twilight of that accomplishment, do not let the hand of power erode that feat. Thank you for your service to Grenada. Continue to exercise patience as you steer this country. listen to the voices of those who do not agree with some of your policies. There may be a thread of goodwill. So, Mr. President, also, it will be remiss of me if I don't say thank you as President of Grenada Netball Association to my executive, the national teams who continue to perform well, our coaches, our sponsors, as we wrap up this year. So, Mr. President, let me say and take this opportunity to thank you for your leadership and to say and wish you and the members of this honorable house, the people of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique, a safe and Christ-filled Christmas. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Is that the light of Senator George?
Yes, it is.
Oh, you want to have the floor now? Okay, it's your turn.
Yes, I'm guided and mindful as to the time and your indication that we would take the lunch break on time.
One second. When is he? It's now. 20 to 12. 20 to 12. So it will be about 5 past 1. 5 past 1? Yeah. Yeah? Yeah, we will go up until, when you're through, we will take the lunch break.
I'm guided, Mr. President.
Yeah, sure. Because I don't want it to break and then it come back. So once you're through, we won't be able to get in another speaker. So we take the lunch break after you've completed. Yeah. Thank you, Senator George. The floor is now yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise to give my full support to the passage of the estimate of revenue and expenditure for the year 2019 as it was moved by the leader of government business. And Mr. President, in presenting my speech, I propose to start, as it were, at the beginning, insofar, Mr. President, as the purpose of a budget is to plan and to make projection of spending and distribution of assets and to project the social impact that they will have on this country. As well, Mr. President, my understanding of the purpose of government is that it is to take us towards development. And in preparing, Mr. President, I took the time to be clear on what the word development meant. And in its ordinary sense, it is the process of growing or changing or becoming more advanced. And in its economic sense, it is the process by which a nation improves the economic, political, and social well-being of its people. And I wanted as well, Mr. President, to put my presentation in the proper historical context. Because when I reviewed the budget, I reminded myself that a short 44 years ago, and this is in the context of our independence, we would have inherited an economy and a social construct that was designed for us by others. And here I am today on the 4th of December 2018, debating a budget fashioned for us, by us. And so, Mr. President, having addressed my mind to those issues and critically reviewed the budget, I am able to conclude that it satisfies its primary objectives. I am satisfied, Mr. President, that it is a budget that puts us on the path towards development and towards transforming our societies. As it is, Mr. President, it is a budget that reveals a policy of structured, cohesive, and sustainable development. It reveals a policy of continuing to work towards and to achieving gender equality for our nation's women. It reveals a policy of instilling and increasing confidence in our private sector. It reveals a policy of fair and equal distribution of resources between public and private citizens. And it reveals a commitment to transcending the ordinary and continues our march as a people to aspire at the forefront of regional development policy as we continue, in the words of the budget and the theme of the budget, to building resilience, advancing economic development, and transforming our economy. And so, Mr. President, I want to start by discussing the concept, as I call it, of a structured, cohesive, and sustainable development. And in doing so, Mr. President, I want to refer to the Fiscal Responsibility Act, Act number 29 of 2015. And I thought, Mr. President, that it would be important to highlight the provisions of the Act, because I know there is a view that it has been used in a way that precludes a fair and an equal distribution of resources. And I think it's important, as part of this debate, Mr. President, for us to bear in mind the situation we were in 2013, as the leader of government business alluded to, and to understand the context in which this act came into force. So that it came into force at a time when we were in uncharted, unprecedented, difficult waters. And we all agreed, all the social partners, the citizens for the most part, that the time had come for us to fashion a development plan and program that would take us not just out of the situation as we were in 2013, but that would allow us to grow in a structured way. And so, Mr. President, if I refer to the head note of the Fiscal Responsibility Act, it says it is an act to establish a transparent and accountable rule-based fiscal responsibility framework in Grenada to guide and anchor fiscal policy during the budget process, to ensure that government finances are sustainable over the short, medium, and longer term, consistent with a sustainable level of debt and for related matters. And it is important, I believe, Mr. President, to underscore the fact that the Act has the force of law and that it is a legal mandate to our Minister of Finance. He is bound by law to comply with its terms, and his failure to do so, Mr. President, will have obvious and natural consequences. So he is mandated, for example, by Section 6 of the Act, and I will read it, Mr. President, because I think it bears repeating. To take appropriate measures to ensure compliance with the Act, including taking appropriate measures to ensure the following. A, that the fiscal and financial affairs of the government are conducted in a transparent manner, with full and timely disclosure, and wide publication of all transactions and decisions involving public revenues and expenditures, and the implications for finance. B, that there is observation of the principle of fiscal sustainability by ensuring that debt is reduced to and then maintained at a prudent and sustainable level as prescribed pursuant to Section 8, subsection 1, by maintaining primary surpluses that are consistent with this objective. C, that there are no announcements or implementation of any new policy initiative unless measures that offset the impact of the policy initiative on the primary balance or overall level of spending have been identified. D, that management of fiscal risks is in accordance with regulations and guidelines to be issued by the minister. And finally, that documented public investment procedures are prepared and made available for the submission and approval of all projects submitted for inclusion in the capital expenditure programs of the central government and covered public entities. And I will be so brave to say, Mr. President, that I have not heard anyone say that the government has failed or fallen short of its obligations in law under the Act. And so in the context of any discussions, we must bear in mind that what is done in the national interest. It is done in the context of what is required for our short-term development. It is done in the context of what is required for our medium-term development and for our long-term development. And, Mr. Speaker, the honest reality is that we cannot expect to eat our cake and have it. And it is a known fact that as part of the natural order, in order to achieve development, we must move in an orderly fashion. We must plan. And having made those plans, we must abide by those plans. And in the course of my research as well, I came across an article. I didn't make a note of it. But the writer was asking himself, in relation to the German economy, which is historically one of the world's strongest economies, what made the Germans so successful? And the study and the data reveal that it was very simply due to their commitment to steady and consistent growth, as opposed to rapid expansion over time. And Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, I beg your pardon, it is my view that in order to transform a society as ours, where a very short time ago we had nothing or next to nothing, we must maintain a structured approach. And that is what the Act and its application seeks to do. And there is no doubt, Mr. Speaker, that its application has produced very tangible benefits. The leader of government business went into details in relation to the revenue and the expenditure and the benefits that we have seen coming out of the homegrown program. And in a little while, Mr. President, I will go into more details in terms of the figures and the projects and so on. And he alluded to the fact as well, and this is an undisputed fact, that Grenada is now an economic role model. I am told, Mr. President, and I have no reason to doubt, that there are countries in the Caribbean who are observing closely our achievements, who, such as Jamaica, have passed legislation similar to ours, and who are interested in implementing policies based on policies such as we have. I am told as well that a similar undertaking has been made in the Bahamas, and that there are other Caribbean territories interested in what we are doing. Barbados as well, I am told. And very often, Mr. President, we don't take the time, and it's difficult, I suppose, to step back and see our achievements for what they are. But the reality, honestly, is that we have made tremendous, meaningful economic strides in this short period of time. There is no doubt, again an undisputed fact, that our economy is the best performing economy in the region. There is no doubt, again, an undisputed fact, that the rate of growth that we have achieved this year and which we are projected to achieve next year is by far the best rate of growth projected in the Caribbean. And so, Mr. President, the objective fact, I would say, is that the application and implementation of the Fiscal Responsibility Act has been to move us from where we were to where we are now, and that it will continue to do so. And I move on, Mr. President, to the second policy observation I made in relation to the budget, which is continuing to work towards and to achieving gender equality for our nation's women. And Mr. President, this is a subject which is very near and dear to me, not just as a woman, but as an attorney at law, very early in my career, I was fortunate enough to work with the Legal Aid and Counseling Clinic. And it was a window for me into the challenges that a number of our nation's women face. And it was an opportunity for me, Mr. President, in real terms, to recognize that we cannot effectively make a claim towards development unless we are taking the nation's women forward in a meaningful way. And I learned there as well that our nation's women are critical to the stability of our society. I saw firsthand that as single mothers, they often bear a disproportionate amount of the social strain and the economic burdens that women face. And it has heartened me, Mr. President, that this administration has seen it fit, beginning with the composition of women in our parliament, to ensure that women's voices are heard. I believe, again, we are forerunners in the region and perhaps in the world as far as the percentages of female parliamentarians go. In the world, I am told. And so I refer as well to the allocations and policies for gender and family affairs. And I applaud especially the program for raising awareness in relation to child sexual abuse, and for the Special Victims Unit in relation to sexually related crimes, domestic violence, and child abuse issues. Because although not expressed to be directly related to women or to gender issues, the reality is, as a friend of mine has as her WhatsApp password, and I love the phrase, women hold up half the sky. And so when we as a government put these measures in place to ensure that our children are safe, it redounds to the benefit of women. When we ensure that there is a safe space for the reporting of sexually related crimes and for domestic violence, it redounds to the benefit of the nation's women. And so I move as well, Mr. President, to the question of instilling and increasing private sector confidence. And I must say, Mr. President, as a business owner, having reviewed the provisions of the budget, I was significantly comforted because I saw that the budget contained projections for the next 3 years, and that what it did effectively was to seek to create a buffer between our local economy and external influences by ensuring direct investment in the economy, especially, Mr. President, in the form of infrastructural resilience projects. And although the leader of government business would have touched on it, Mr. President, I want to take some time on the issue and to look at the projects and to discuss the investment as well. So I start by looking, Mr. Speaker, at the Climate Resilient Water Sector Project. And my colleague, Senator Roberts, would have spoken as well to the need for increased water collection and improved storage. And this, Mr. President, is a project that is valued at EC $125 million. And what it does, Mr. Speaker, in addition to injecting that sum of money into the local economy, is that it ensures that in a society such as ours, where we are vulnerable to climate issues and to climate change, we are taking whatever steps are necessary to mitigate against the adverse consequences. And I touch very briefly as well on the question of making St. George's the first climate resilient city. That as well was spoken to by the leader of government business. But I think it bears mentioning that the value of that project is 350 million EC dollars. And I speak as well, Mr. President, to the Global Environment Facility, in respect of which Grenada is one of 10 Caribbean countries participating in a US $20.7 million project implemented jointly by the United Nations Environment Program and United Nations Development Program. And I speak as well, Mr. President, to the renewable energy sector and its development, and the fact that this will bring a real and meaningful injection of investment and of cash into the economy of Grenada. And Mr. President, I wish to speak as well to the fact that the budget, by its construct, will preserve private sector gains in the event of a natural disaster. And I'm sure, Mr. President, we recall the devastation that affected us in 2004 when we were struck by Hurricane Ivan, and the estimated cost of the damage to our economy was then $1.1 billion. And that was estimated to be 200% of our GDP, as it then was. And I make the point as well, Mr. President, that at any time, in one fell swoop, we can find ourselves susceptible to this sort of disaster and this sort of damage. And this is our economic reality, Mr. President, and we must seek at all times to mitigate against it. And this is what this budget endeavors to do. I refer as well, Mr. President, to the reduction in taxation. In relation to the income tax, the 2% reduction, and the 2% reduction in the corporate tax. And what that does, Mr. President, for the private sector is that it allows for that 2% to either be reinvested or to be put back to whatever use the corporation or the individual taxpayer thinks fit. And 2% may not seem to be a lot, Mr. Speaker, but I think what it goes to show is the government's commitment to alleviating the tax obligations on its citizens in a way that allows it to continue to do what it needs to do, but also to meet its promises to citizens. I refer as well to the small business development initiatives undertaken by the government. And I read this, and in preparation as well, I recalled, Mr. President, a young man who I was fortunate to meet at the art exhibition at Spiceland Mall over the weekend. And in speaking to him, Mr. President, he impressed me with what I would have to call his obvious ability and greatness. And I meet a lot of young people throughout the length and breadth of Grenada, Mr. President, who have tremendous potential. And I think it is important, as this government is doing and will continue to do, that these young people have this space, especially the creative ones amongst us, who may not be drawn to the traditional careers, but that they have the space to grow, and they have the space to develop, and that they have the support, as here in the budget, to develop small businesses that are going to work for them and that are going to be sustainable. So I refer, Mr. President, to the Small Business Development Fund, and it is noted that since the beginning of the program, 1,724 applications were received, with 748 existing businesses and 570 new businesses benefiting. And the three main sectors accessing this facility were in agriculture, retail, and fishing, with a total of 570 new jobs being created. And I refer as well, Mr. President, to the support which the private sector has received, particularly the work of the Grenada Industrial Development Corporation. There are a number of projects which would have benefited from support at the GIDC. And as at September 2014, there were 47 applications for investment incentives, with 41 projects being approved for incentive support. 23 of those projects were within the tourism sector, 14 in the manufacturing sector, and 4 in the services sector. And the proposed investments in these 2018 projects are estimated at $272 million, with approximately 800 jobs being created. And Mr. President, as I went through the list of projects, I was impressed by not just the amount of projects, but by the range of projects. And I noted as well, Mr. President, that there were a number of these projects that were to take place in the north of the island. And that is in direct answer to the question or the point made by my colleague, Senator Roberts. So that there is, for example, the Mount Pleasant Estate project, also referred to by the Leader of Government Business. And this is a project of a different nature and quite necessary in times such as these, in that it involves the construction and equipping of a crop production and agro-processing facility on 7 acres of land on the former Brothers Estate in Guave. And the value of the proposed investment is EC $8.1 million, and approximately 29 persons will be employed upon completion of the facility. I refer as well to the Sun Hunters project, which deals with the expansion of ATV tow operations into the parish of St. Mark. And the project cost is estimated at EC $2.6 million and will provide additional employment for 10 persons. And so, Mr. President, I wish to speak as well to the support for indigenous hoteliers. And again, it is important to note, Mr. Speaker, this President's commitment to the development of its people, so that in partnership with the Grenada Hotel and Tourism Association, the Tourism Authority, and the Grenada Development Bank, the government has teamed up with them to provide support to small indigenous hoteliers. The support is to be in the form of a soft loan facility at the Grenada Development Bank. It is a revolving fund which will finance training and marketing programs to support the efforts of small hotels that are members of the Hotel Association. And an initial amount of $3 million EC dollars will be made available for the program. And I turn as well to the question of transportation and the improvements which are proposed and which will be made in that sector. It is no secret, Mr. President, that we have a congestion problem, particularly in the south of the island. And as a business owner, and I am sure as other members of the private sector are aware and will agree, time is money. And if the issue remains unchecked, then it means that in real terms, on any given day, when workers can't get to work on time, or when people who might ordinarily travel to the south to do business are discouraged because it is just too time-consuming, it means that there is a cost for the persons involved. And so in addressing the question of congestion, the government is meeting its needs, its mandate, to improve the conditions for the private sector and to bring benefits to the economy. And so I just wanted to speak very briefly to a couple of the initiatives here that I think not just endure to the benefit of the private sector, but to citizens as a whole. In 2019, there is going to be a new bus route created to service the route from St. Andrew to St. David via Wester Hall into Woodlands, Grandlands Valley, and terminating in Grandlands. And I want to commend that initiative, Mr. President, because I live at Wester Hall. I travel the route from Wester Hall into St. George's every morning. And I notice the persons who are gathered, especially at the Woodlands Junction, and I believe many of them are from St. David's or from the north of the island. And this is an important initiative that I am certain will bring, will alleviate a lot of the pressure on those commuters. As well, Mr. Speaker, the government is considering a national transportation authority that will be responsible for all aspects of transportation, inclusive of licensing, issuance of bus route stickers, inspection, certification, and fee collection. And Cabinet will soon review draft proposals, and a final decision on the construction of the authority will be made in 2019. I refer as well, Mr. President, to the creation of the traffic warden's position, which I know will go a long way towards alleviating the congestion in the city of St. George's, and as well will benefit the persons who own businesses and who conduct business in the city of St. George's. And Mr. President, I thought at this stage it would be useful to speak to our attitude generally towards investment and towards foreign investment. In my preparation and in speaking to persons at all different levels, I know that there is sometimes a reluctance to embrace things that are new, things that we perceive to be foreign, things that we perceive to be bringing a change to what we otherwise know. And in a sense, I understand it. I understand the persons who are concerned. Not in a sense, I understand it, the concerns of the persons who speak about access to our beaches, access to, or the denial of access to routes that have traditionally been used by citizens and so on. And I say my answer to that is that we must all approach investment and changes in a reflective way and in a way that allows us to maintain what I myself like to call the Grenadian way. That way where we have been able to coexist with each other. We must take investors and investors as they come with an open mind, because the reality, Mr. President, to me from where I stand, is that we cannot continue on this path of development and on this journey on our own. We need buy-in from outside. And it is simply a question, in my view, of finding a middle ground that allows us to do what we need to do and to get the benefit that we need to get from the investment. And so I move on, Mr. President, to the policy that I have seen emerging in the budget of fair and equal distribution of resources between public and private citizens. And I am mindful of the pensions issue. I am mindful of the comments made by the leader of government business as to the undertaking of negotiations. I am heartened by the fact that the parties are going to be back at the table. In fact, I believe they are at the table. Our discussions are underway as we speak. And I am hopeful that at the end of the day, whatever position we arrive at will be a position that achieves a balance between the needs of the private citizens and the public servants. And there is just one area that I wanted to mention. I think I have a sort of duty as an attorney at law to speak on very briefly. And that is the view which I have heard addressed, that there is a constitutional guarantee of the 25% gratuity, as it was referred to, based on the interpretation of the Irving McQueen case. And I have taken the time, Mr. President, myself, to read the relevant provisions of the Constitution, to read the Armstrong case, and to read the McQueen case myself. I've also taken the time to read the Pension Disqualifications Act and the Pensions Act. And for present purposes, there are 3 sections of the Constitution that deal with pensions. And that is Section 84, subsection 8, Section 92, and Section 93. And I think it's important to note that neither of these sections speak to the intricacies of awarding pensions or provide a formula for calculations of pension. Section 92 of the Constitution simply enshrines the start date for calculating pension benefits. And by that I mean, Mr. President, that it gives constitutional protection to the date which should be used when a pension is being considered or calculated. So 92 subrule 2 says the law to be applied with respect to any pension benefits. Perhaps I should start with 92 subrule 1. The law to be applied with respect to any pension benefits that were granted to any person before this section comes into operation shall be the law that was in force at the date on which those benefits were granted, or any law in force at a later date that is not less favorable to that person. And then 92.2 says the law to be applied with respect to any pension benefits not being benefits to subsection 1 of this section applies shall, A, insofar as those benefits are wholly in respect of a period of service as a judge or public officer that commenced before the date upon which this section comes into operation, be the law that was in force on the date upon which this section comes into operation. And B says, insofar as those benefits are wholly or partially in respect of a period of service as a judge or public officer that commenced after the section comes into operation, be the law in force on the date on which that period of service commenced, or any law in force at a later date that is not less favorable to that person. And then it continues to speak to the exercise of an option as to which of the two. So it essentially says, when it comes down to that, in terms of a date, if there is to be a discussion in relation to one of two laws, it is the law which is more beneficial to the public servant which must apply. But in substance, all Section 92 does is to enshrine the start dates for calculating pension benefits. I do not read it to entrench the right to a pension, and I certainly do not understand it to guarantee a pension ad infinitum or forever. But it is distinct from Section 84, subsection 8, which is the section that was considered and dealt with in the McQueen case. And what that does is entrench the right to a pension, but only in a limited sense. And I think it's important as well to read the provisions of Section 84, subsection 8. It says every officer who is required to retire on abolition of his office or for the purpose of reorganization of his ministry or department shall be entitled to pension and retiring benefits as if he had attained the compulsory retiring age. So it is evident immediately that Section 84, subsection 8 does not speak to entrenching pension rights across the board. All it does is to say that when a public servant is required to retire before his time, or his ministry is being reorganized, he is entitled to his pension without more. And in both the Armstrong and the McQueen cases, the dates which were considered in terms of the public officer's appointment were on the 17th of March 1983 and on the 1st of March 1984. And in both of those cases, the court held that those officers were entitled to their pension benefits, notwithstanding the provisions of People's Law number 24 of 1983. And as we know, People's Law number 24 of 1983 was an act intituled Pensions Disqualification Act. And what that act sought to do at Section 3, under the heading disqualification, was to say any person who is appointed to a post in the service of the government of Grenada on or after the appointed day shall not be entitled to any pension, gratuity, or other allowance under any of the scheduled enactments. And then it goes on to recite the scheduled enactments. And this act has been incorporated into the existing Pensions Act. Into the existing Pensions Act at Section 18, I believe it is. Yes, at Section 18. And it's important to note that in both the Armstrong and in the McQueen case, the disqualification provision was considered. But it was not struck down in its entirety, so that it remains law. All the court said in both instances, in the case of Armstrong, was that when it looked at Section 92, she was not affected because her start date was at a time when the Pensions Act was still in force. And all it said in relation to McQueen was that he was not affected because at the time, he was entitled to rely on the provisions of Section 84, subsection 8, which is to say that because his office had been abolished, the effect of it was as if he were retired, and so his pensions applied, and he was entitled to them. The issue of the day, as it stands now, was never considered, has never been considered. There is no pronouncement that strikes out the disqualification provision. And so my understanding of the law as it stands at the moment is that there is no right to a pension as such. And as I say, Mr. President, I debated long and hard as to whether or not I should raise this in the current atmosphere, but I think it is something that is crucially important for us to discuss at this stage, for our citizens to be aware of, for persons who are affected, or who are going to be affected, to be aware of, and as well to be considered in the context of all that is coming and going to be coming in relation to the pension negotiations. And so, Mr. President, in concluding, I'm always one for brevity where I can be brief. I wanted to refer to the commitment to the commitment in the budget to transcending the ordinary and continuing on our march as a people to aspire at the forefront of regional development policy as we continue to build resilience, advancing social development, and transforming our economy. And I wanted to say, Mr. President, that this budget document and the allocations is an achievement that I think we can all be proud of. No doubt, Mr. President, when it is held up to scrutiny, because hindsight is 20/20 vision, there will be aspects of it that are capable of improvement, that on further reflection may be, perhaps, you could have been treated differently or otherwise. But I think, to be fair to the persons who have worked very hard to craft it, it is an excellent document. And I note, Mr. Speaker, we have a tendency to hold one side up to a standard of perfection, and another side seems to get by on a little less than perfection. But in closing, I want to say simply that we should recall where we were in 2013 and where we are now today, a short 5 years later, and to commend the budget and its initiatives to the people of Grenada as a document and as a policy that will allow us to build on generations, in this generation and for future generations to come. I thank you, Mr. President.
Honorable members, Well, I was trying to avoid having to split the time in anyone's contribution, but we are now 12:30, and we can go up until 1:30 and then take the lunch there. I wouldn't like to split anybody's contribution and have it interrupted by the interlude of lunch. So the next speaker, one second. I have been informed by the clerk that the lunch is here. So may I just solicit the views of senators? Do you think we should take the break now, or we should give the floor to the other speaker and take the break at 11:45? It's now 12:30. That would take us up to 1:30, 1:45. Or do you think we should take the break now? Is that the view of senators? All right, all those in favor of taking the break now say aye. To the contrary, say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. Honorable members, this now stands adjourned for 1 hour.